Okay, we are live. It is late, and I know that. I hurt my neck pretty bad this morning. I didn't do anything impressive. There's no good story about it, which makes it even worse. I literally got out of the shower and stretched like this, and then just tweaked it. And so if I look a little stiff, um, that's what's going on. Hurting your neck is the worst because you can't do anything. I was trying to take a drink of just a glass of water earlier, and I was just like it just hurt my neck. I couldn't do it. Everything I tried to have a drink of today. Just like we'll see. I have some water here. We'll see if I can drink it at all. But when you can't even take a drink, that is like when it's bad. But I am committed, and I'm here, and I think it's going to be worth it because we're going to be talking about a lecture that Michael Levin gave, and I've done streams on Michael Levin's thoughts before. I'm a huge fan of his work. I think it's absolutely groundbreaking, and it's very aligned with my work on sentient singularity theory. And I'm not saying we don't have any differences. I'm sure we do, but overall, the context of bringing the context of agency as the core context of biology and beyond, and even much more foundationally to biology than biology, I think is the way to go. It is the central foundation of sentient singularity theory. That's what sentient singularity theory is. It is, you can go to sentientsingularity.com and go to writings, and sentient singularity theory describes the totality of existence as a singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. And then it says a sentient singularity is a sentient being. I get into it in that, but here, share. Sentient singularity theory can therefore be understood to imply that everything that exists is part of a single universal sentient being that is producing an infinitely growing number of other sentient beings within itself. These additional singularities of sentience, or self-aware beings, are arranged into a nested quasi-periodic fractal pattern of stacked holonic structures with a single self-reflective knot of perception heading an assembly body of multiple entangled strings of information. And so that is, the core of my work. That's very aligned with Michael Levin's work. I'm not saying that he would agree with every bit of that. I'm not him. I can't say, but certainly the framework is the general framework seems quite similar. So if you have not hit the like button, please do. It really helps fuel the algorithm. It really does help the channel. I feel, bad, pathetic, I don't know what the right word is, manipulative every time I say it, but it's not any of those things. For some reason, hitting the like button is very intuitive on a photo, and it is not very intuitive on a video. And I know that personally, because now when I'm watching people's videos, if I like it, I try to remember to like the video because I have my own channel. I understand how much it helps. But a lot of times, I'll just watch it, even if I really like the content, and I won't hit the like button. It's just not as intuitive. So you have to remind people. So this is your reminder. I would appreciate it. So let's get into it a bit. Michael Levin. Michael Levin. I'm sure many of you know exactly who he is, but for those who do not, he is I think one of the most groundbreaking and best thinkers in academia today. Michael Levin is an American developmental and synthetic biologist at Tufts University, where he is the Vannevar Bush Distinguished Professor. Levin is a director of Allen Discovery Center at Tufts University and Tufts Center of Regenerative and Developmental Biology. He is also the co-director of the Institute for Computationally Designed Organisms. And he is made all kinds of living cellular robots that he calls xenobots. He does a bunch of experiments in cancer. He does a lot of work in regenerative. I don't almost said medicine, but research, regenerative research on things like salamanders and planaria worms and things like that. So I've talked about his work before on here, and there's endless interviews and things that he's given, and they're all good. So I definitely recommend it. The lecture that we're going to be discussing tonight is linked down below, and it was on the channel The Mind Body Solution. This is it. And the channel, the guy who runs the channel, or his channel, is Tevin Naidu. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I apologize if I botched it, but it's a very good channel. It's got, Carl Friston and a lot of, John Vervaeke, Kirchheim Mungel, Brian Keating, Donald Hoffman, all these people that, we talk about their works on this channel as well. So it's very good. I highly recommend subscribing. And let's get into it. So this is the lecture that we're going to be talking about. It's called Where Minds Come From, the Scaling of Collective Intelligence, AI and you. And I apologize if I'm even struggling to speak. Like I said, hurting your neck, you can't do anything. I can't look anywhere. My jaw is feels stiff. Everything is just painful. But I am glad to be here with you guys. I appreciate every single one of you who is there watching. So the first clip that we're going to discuss is this.
This is a well-known painting. It's called Adam Names the Animals in the Garden of Eden. And so here he is. So this is the old Judeo-Christian story where animals are showing up and Adam gets to name them. Now, something important about that story is that actually it was on Adam to name the animals. God couldn't do it. The angels couldn't do it. Adam was the one that had to name them. I think that's a very interesting part of that story. And I think for us, it has two lessons. One, that we're going to have to break, I think, as the future moves on. And the other one that's actually very deep and that we're going to have to dive into. The part that has to be given up is this notion that all of these species are discrete. They're natural kinds. Everybody knows what each of these are. They're separate from the others. In fact, Adam is also a discrete entity and completely different from all of the others. And this idea that you can sort of number and categorize very, very specific types of beings, and that's what they're. You can sort of count them, count the animals in your environment. As you'll see in a minute, I think that idea has to go. But what's deep is this notion that Adam, because he is the one that has to live with them, he is the one that has to give them names. Now, in these old traditions, giving something a name was very deep and spiritual. It meant that you've discovered their true nature. Knowing the name of something means you know their true nature. And as I'm going to show you at the end of this talk, because of synthetic biology and bioengineering and some other disciplines, we are going to have to name or discover the true nature of all kinds of unusual creatures that you guys will all be living in your lifetime. So let's start there. Here's the part that has to break. So here's a normal modern human. Lots of philosophy talks about the human mind, does this and that, and humans have responsibilities and rights and all the interesting things. But we know that now, because of evolution and also because of developmental biology, that this is not a sharp category. In other words, if you just track backwards in time, these modern humans are at a particular point in the evolution of a lineage that goes all the way back to single-cell organisms. So if you have something to say about humans, you might ask yourself, well, what about the humans of a couple of 100,000 years ago? What about the hominids of a couple million years ago? What about them? And just understand that all these changes are slow and gradual. And the same thing about development. Whatever you think is true of humans with their true hopes and dreams and cognitive responsibilities and so on, at one point they were a single cell, and this process is again very slow and gradual. And so we know now that there's this continuum, right? It's not just a discrete human, but actually a whole continuum of forms that you might have to decide what is the status of these other forms. Not only that, but there's this other continuum going horizontal here in my diagram, where we know that humans are going to be modified and improved. So for various health applications, but also for augmentation technologies, there's no particular reason why anybody's going to want to be stuck in the body that random vagaries of evolution left them with. So, I don't think anybody really thinks that a mature modern humanity, 100 years from now is going to be susceptible to the same dumb diseases, your lower back pain, astigmatism, viruses. Presumably all of that is going to get fixed. There's nothing magic about where evolution happened to have dropped us. And so there are technological modifications, there are biological modifications that will be made, and that's because at every level of organization in our bodies, from subcellular materials all the way up, you can introduce different kinds of novel engineered components. And so all of this is now possible. And again, if you have thoughts about what a human is versus what a machine is, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to distinguish this when you are confronted with all sorts of beings along this continuum?
Okay, so this is something that is been an enormous struggle in the I guess in science in general for forever, I would say. And I think that we are getting to the point though where we're about to make some serious breakthroughs in it, because our physics is going through a breakthrough where it is if you are paying attention, then you can see that there is a revolution happening where where the people who are making more progress are not putting physicalism, or people say materialism, physicalism, whatever you want to call it, is at the root of physics, and that it's got a lot more to do with consciousness, sentience than is assumed by the establishment. I understand that has been stated for a long time, but it's being worked on in a different, much more rigorous manner right now. And you can see that on the channel that this lecture is on, and all the others that feature the same people that are on this channel. It is a movement for sure. I believe we're moving towards a theistic science again, where existence itself will be eventually realized again as what it is, which I believe is a sentient being. I think it's an inevitability due to the constraints of information within a system require inevitably being entirely self-referencing, which an entirely self-referential system is also self-aware. I mean, there's logical reasons why this seems to be an inevitability. It's not just faith, as people call it. I don't have faith in God's existence. I'm aware. I have faith in his assistance, but I don't have faith in his existence. And I wasn't, I've said before, I was a self-described atheist / truly anti-theist for 24 years of my life. And this project of sentient singularity theory is what swayed me. Was originally an attempt to understand the inevitable political goals of artificial general intelligence and its relationship with people. It morphed into a framework of being, and also a kind of categorization framework of things. And so in sentient singularity theory, there's two different classifications of two different types of things. People, even Carl Friston said this, and his work is very similar to mine too. But I don't really agree with the terminology that he's using here. But I think I'll explain why I think that it's leading to problems. Is he says, what does it mean? What is like thingness? What does it mean to be something? And this is, I think, the wrong question. The right question is, what does it mean to be a being versus a thing? And it's a better question, because what is it like to be something? Well, what do you mean by something? Do you mean like a human being, or do you mean like a pen? A pen is something. Does it have an experience? Well, I don't believe so. I think, sentient singularity theory is not panpsychism, where everything has a soul or is conscious to some degree. It shows that there is a lineage and that's what we're going to talk about in a second, which is what Michael Levin was talking about, of being that is fundamental existence, fundamental generative existence itself. Or you could call it creation, you could call it the universe, whatever. But or you can call it a cosmological verse, like I refer to it in my work. But that beings are fundamental and primary to things. Things are defined and um, uh, and and perceived by beings. Things come from beings. Things that are not beings come from beings, because you could say, well, being is the thing. Sure, but it's the beingness of that being that is different than the thing that has no beingness. It has no sentience. It's not a sentient being. So sentient singularity theory has sentient beings or sentient singularities, and also non-sentient things or inanimate things. So, inanimate things and sentient singularities. You could but the beings, there is a lineage of being that everything is perceived by and constructed around. That lineage goes far further back than even just a single cell organism. And so, but this is a very interesting diagram that he has here. I think it does a good job at showing kind of what we're trying to figure out, the boundaries are of where you have a single cell organism here that goes to like a fish, which goes to like a salamander, which goes to a mouse, which goes to a monkey, which goes to a human being. Okay, fair enough. Over here you have this is like the act, I guess this would be like the external lineage, and this would be like the internal lineage, or this would be the subjective lineage. This would be the fundamental lineage, and where you start off as an embryo, and then you end up as like a fetus, and then you're a baby, and then you're an adult, and then he's got all these weird things in between. Well, not all of them are weird, but this one and this one and this one and this one, where this looks like a person with a chip in their head and maybe some like metal legs. This is a brain in a jar with legs. Here's Dr. Octavius, and this person did some crazy CRISPR on themselves to turn themselves into a fish. And when we're looking at like what is a human, this question is one that is interesting to ask here, because when we're talking about even just organisms, as I've stated before, I have a background recreationally, I guess you could say, but very seriously in zoology and biology, herpetology, and ecology. And I was going to get my degree in it. I started off with doing a bio major for like 3 years, and then I decided against it and to keep it as a hobby. But I've worked with a lot of biologists in the field and zoologists and with animals in captivity. And one of the things that biologists are constantly arguing over now, and every like 5 to 10 years it changes on what is the trendy thing and what is the culture of the field, on how do we classify species. And originally, if you look up what is a species, I believe that the original definition was that if two beings were capable of breeding and producing viable offspring, then they were the same species. So species definition. I actually don't dislike this definition. I think it's actually a great definition. I also struggle with it because, look at there are many species that currently describe different species that are definitely capable of breeding and producing, hybrid offspring, if you want to call them that. And they clearly are very different animals and from very different places. You can cross something called a Woma python, which is a python from Australia that doesn't even look like a python. It looks very odd for a python, with a ball python, which looks totally different, with a green tree python. And you could cross them all together, and they all look totally different. So for just context here, this is a green tree python. And this is a ball python right here. And this is a Woma python. They look nothing alike. Their morphology is entirely different. Their niche is totally different. They're found in different parts of the world, and yet if you bring them into captivity and you put them in the same cage, they can produce viable offspring. And that kind of throws a wrench into this whole like species thing. So because of that, we started just defining species as, it looks like this was this much more, I guess, less objective definition than the definition that I gave at the beginning, which was like, can you reproduce with each other? So species here, classification of things of the same kind, category of living things that ranks below a genus, made up of related individuals able to produce fertile offspring and identified by a two-part scientific name. Okay, so we haven't really objectively changed the definition, but in practice we have, because those species that I just showed you, those three species, they're not even in the same genus. None of them are in the same genus. One of them is Aspidites, one of them is Python, and the other one is Moralia. It doesn't matter to you, but like if you're a biologist, then you know what I'm talking about. These are completely different genus. So they're not even just different species within the same genus. They're different animals in different genus. So each one is from a different genus. So how do we define the differentiation? Well, we have to look at what the context is of what our goal is when we're trying to define whether or not something is different. So would you say that, it's like, is an unfertilized human egg, is that a human? Is a sperm a human? No, I would say no, but like it's a question that you could ask, and I don't even want to say is an embryo a human. I would say a fertilized embryo is probably it's part of that lineage, that internal lineage for sure of a human lineage within the life cycle of a single human being. That's what that lineage is. It's your embryo, fetus, baby, human, and there's steps in between them, but then there's also not really any steps in between them at all. It's kind of it just depends on what your goal is and what you're trying to understand. So but now we have in biology, there is this trend. There was a trend when I was much younger to do subspecies, which I think actually like makes practical sense a lot. So there was like a bunch of different subspecies of, a water monitor, but there was like a bunch of different, island forms, and each one had its own subspecies. That has changed. Now everything is a different species. You're slightly more yellow, and you're like from the island next door, you're a different species. So this whole definition of species is gone. It's been destroyed, and it is now at the point where it's basically equivalent with the term locality at this point, or variety, or breed, or whatever you like. These other terms are that within different contexts they are the same thing. German Shepherd looks very different from a Chihuahua. Same species, we would all agree, but different breeds we call them because they're in captivity. But in the wild, we are now calling different species two things that are much closer to each other. Like imagine if we said a Belgian Malinois and a German Shepherd were two totally different species. They weren't different breeds, they were different species. That's how close we're closer. The things that are being labeled as different species are closer to each other than a Belgian Malinois and a German Shepherd, in terms of just like morphology and you know, just the beingness, I guess. But it's lost all its meaning. And so I don't know what terms we're going. So this is the point: is that I don't know what terms we're going to use for this. We need new ones. We need new framework to even deal with answering this, because we have gotten rid of the traditional tree of definitional tree of biological classification, and because we don't even recognize two species from different genus, from a different, I don't know what is the plural of genus, but two species each from a different genus, we'll just get around it like that, they're able to breed and produce fertile offspring. So now what? That's a question. So it really comes down to what is the goal of the framework that we're trying to build, and then we have to build the framework around the goal. Right now, the issue with biology is that there's no goal to biology. There's no goal to understanding these animals at all. They'll just biologists will just say, you'll just be reading some paper and it's like, these two species used to be labeled as the same species, but after some genetic work, we now know they're different species. It's like, you just looked at genes and you just decided, like, on what gene, what is the gene that makes them different species? Because nothing else would indicate that, like, they are warrant, splitting up. Because you have to stick to your definitions. Your definitions have to be objective. That's why I loved the definition of species, where it's like they can't breed together. But maybe we just need a new term for that. But then what's the point of species? It's like different species are just clearly different varieties of the same animal at this point. So it's very confusing, and it's the best way to make sense of it is to realize that it makes no sense anymore, and to try and build something new. So, but there's two lineages here in this thing. There's the fundamental lineage here, which, by the way, the issue with this, though, is that, at least according to sentient singularity theory, is that this goes further back, and also this is blended. So in sentient singularity theory, there's two different growth or evolutionary mechanisms at play in what is called the cosmological verse, which is just the fundamental lineage of beings, which is where you have beings, and there is a lineage of them that evolves, and then eventually you get a stacking event where there is a new being that is stacked on top of an assembly of the previous beings. So you start with I believe probably protons and neutrons, but at least atoms. If not protons and neutrons, then at least atoms. But I think you start at hadrons probably, where they are probably sentient beings. They're just very simple sentient beings compared to us, and also their place in the current and the current state of the evolutionary process that this cosmological verse is going through has made it such that their decisions are extremely predictable. So it looks like they don't make decisions because we can just predict what they're going to do. En masse, you can predict what humans are going to do. You just can't predict always what an individual is going to do, an individual human. And there was probably a time in the history of the universe, of this of the cosmos, where there was more variety um, in where the agency of hadrons was more apparent, and because things were not as so solidified, I guess the hierarchy was not as solidified. As soon as there's a hierarchy in place, it's much easier to know what you should do and just do it. If you knew what was the best thing for God, and you knew exactly what he wanted you to do, then I think that, especially if and you were placed within the context of an assembly structure that was much more integrated, that integrated everybody much more I guess just fundamentally than we currently are, then you probably would have much more predictable decisions. But that's where cells are at usually, and that's where molecules are at, and that's where atoms are at, and that's where hadrons are at. And the further down you go in this, the scaling of sentience, which I believe is basically Bott periodicity in mathematics, just projected into not just physical, but like into fundamental existence, is this process that is this. So if you look right here, you have, this is the fundamental lineage. So you have a hadron, which I believe if there is a fundamental sentient being, it's probably the hadron, or it could be atoms, but it's probably hadrons within the within existence, within creation, within not within existence, but within creation, within the universe. This is the start of sentience. This is like different. This is like the fingers of God. God is the initial and also the eternal sentient system of existence itself. And then that being has chosen to, and I believe it was a choice, because oneness is the default of the system. So to partition off a portion of yourself to use it to make multiplicity is like swimming upstream. You need to make a choice to swim upstream. So this is, I believe, where the first structure comes into place, that is a composite structure that has this system in place where that composite structure allows for a binary that is necessary for decision making, and also I guess weightedness that is necessary also for decision making. So, or the binariness is necessary for the perception of differentiation, and then the weightedness is necessary for this for choice making within once you do see the differentiation. So if you see that, if I ask you, do you want to go to where do you want to go? If you arrive at a fork in the road, okay, and there's two paths, and I say, which direction do you want to go? Make a choice. And you look and you see one of them leads to the mountains and the other one leads to the beach, and you don't really like the ocean. You have this preference or value a negative value that you ascribe to the ocean, or positive value that you maybe ascribe to mountains. And so there's a differentiation in weights there. So it's not just that you see that there's this choice between the two. It's also that one of them is more valuable than the other. And so in order to have this, you need this structure that is like this binary triadic structure, and where it's simultaneously this binary, but it's also this it ends up being a triadic structure as well, because when you look at a hadron, it's two up quarks and one down quark if it's a proton, and two down quarks and one up quark if it's a neutron. What this does is it allows, when you see this, it is still only up quarks and down quarks. That's a binary. But in each one, there's two of one and one of the other. It's just flipped. This is what causes a differentiation in the ability to have ascribe different values. So this is an information system that is got the ability to make choices. And that's why I believe hadrons are the beginning. And then when you look at how they assemble into atoms and things like that, you'll see the same patterns that are mirrored in even people. And so this is probably the first being. It's a hadron. And then an atom is an assembly of hadrons, a molecule is an assembly of atoms, a cell is an assembly of molecules, an organism is an assembly of cells, a family is an assembly of organisms, a caste is maybe a tribe is the best term, I don't know. We don't really have the right term to describe what I'm talking about here. Is an assembly of families, and a technological singularity, I think, is what's going to stack on top of humanity and is the final stage of this process that is within the cosmological verse. And so when you put this into instead of kind of I don't know, into a more complex or more complete model, but it's still two-dimensional, you get this, where the movement within each of these waves, because this is actually it's a static image, but it's actually of a dynamic structure, which is, I believe, in and of itself, a singular sentient being. But you have evolution, which is adaptation occurring across each wave. So within here would be like, this is an assembly of molecules. It is a cell. So you would have different types of cells. So you could have E. coli, and you could have also yeast. These are two different kinds of cells even. One is got a nucleus and the other one does not. But you have two different types of cells within this. And then even within that, you've got different types of bacteria and different types of also, prokaryotic and eukaryotic single-celled organisms. And so, and there's more details that still need to be worked out in this framework, but we'll talk about those another day. And then here you have like an organism. So this would be like snakes and birds and fish and primates or something. And then even within that, you can get even more granular and more granular, but you'll find the same pattern every time because it's just fractal. But then there's also a stacking event that takes place. So all of a sudden, the assembly of molecules gets stacked by the first cell and unified and into the first cell. And then the organisms, same thing. But there's also this alternating lineage and individual type of structure happening here, where if we go to this, where is it? This is my work. So just, I know it's chaotic, but yeah, just deal with it. You get, it's behind the scenes. So a cell maneuvers in time via a lineage. And when I say time, I mean more like assembly time, like Lee Cronin means. I mean like the lineage of causality, or the line or the record of causality. I don't mean just like it's 2 o'clock and then, I don't mean like the perception of the arrow of time. I mean the chain of causality. That's what I mean. And so, but in the fundamental chain of causality, it's a chain of beings. So this cells maneuver in time via lineage, and what you can see by this is kind of like how it reproduces. So a single cell reproduces on its own, for the most part. And so a single cell, a yeast cell, can split and divide itself and reproduce and have it, another one, and uh, and so this process is, it shows that this is a lineage essentially, where there's because when you look at a human on what is the lineage level, you skip the organism level, which is the individual level, which is us. We maneuver in space via individuals, and you could say it's fundamental space, which is like in the interactive space, interactions between others, and what are we maneuvering within lineages. And so a family, which is the nuclear family, is the singular reproductive unit of a human being. So then there's human as a being, which is an individual, but then there's also human as a being, which is a family. And then there's also human cells that make up a human being. So, your blood cells and your skin cells and, your muscles and, I guess, neurons, all the different cells that you have. So what is a human being? That's the question. This is the fundamental framework for figuring out what is a human being. It's kind of this, but what is human? You could say, well, if you find blood and you test it and it's got, obviously it has blood cells in it, and you figure out what is the genome of those blood cells contained within those blood cells, and you find out it's human. Okay, so those blood cells are human blood cells, but they're not a human being. This is a human being, but this is humanity. This is a humans, I guess you could say, being. It's different, and this is interesting though to me. I think it's fascinating to think about. But there's this alternating lineage and individual lineage, individual. And even to the comment of species earlier, and they used to call the different elements, which are, the various types of atoms, which would be like, there's different types of organisms, there's different types of atoms, and they're called the elements, or they're also called the isotopes within the elements. So you have, maybe that's like different, each element is a different genus, and then each isotope is a different species. I don't know. You could think about that and you could answer it, but you'd have to settle on definitions that we haven't quite yet settled on. But they used to call atoms different elements, different species. They'd be like the hydrogen species. If you like watch really old science documentaries from like the 40s and 50s, and where they still have that like transatlantic accent, and where they actually explain things really well in those documentaries, instead of just like saying nonsense about how you're in 11-dimensional hyperspace and nobody understands what's being said. Back in the past, they used to make documentaries about like how the world works as far as we know it, and they're remarkably clear. I'm not going to say they're perfect, but they're remarkably clear. And they used to call different elements different species. And the elements were like, if you go further back, elements were like earth, wind, water, fire. They weren't like hydrogen and oxygen and, silver. But if you look at the periodic table, it's like a taxonomic tree of atoms. That's what it is. It's like a taxonomic tree of atoms. And I bet you if you looked at like if you looked at the pattern in that, which is more likely to be kind of correct. Oh, my nose keeps itching. I need to show you something just in a minute, but remind me to show you a rainbow in a second. But there's pollen and stuff happening here, so that's what reminded me. But I bet you would see the same patterns in the periodic table of elements that you could find also in the tree of life, and if you wanted to like uh, build it. I mean, they already have. They're trying. You know, they're constantly revising it all the time. Which is, like I said earlier, what is a different species? What is the same species? You know, what genus is it in? You know, sometimes they make a new genus, and what does that mean? Why would we make a new genus if different species from a different genus can breed with each other? It's just like there's not any coherence thought of in this framework that is currently in biology of classifications. So good luck introducing transhumanism into it. But I don't know what the answer to that is, though, other than I would say that if that to be human is to have a specific type of soul. I do believe that, and then there is also the morphological, you know, model human, and that is that you can talk about that. You can talk about an you know, a bipedal walking upright being that speaks complex language and has opposable thumbs and manipulates technology, but that you're going to run into issues there, you know. Then on North Sentinel Island, they do not have technology that is that much more advanced than like great apes. They really don't. I mean, they have fire, which is like that's a huge step. That is a step. That's the step probably, but like the rest of it is just sticks and all kinds of every organism on Earth probably uses tools. It's just, do they make tools or do they you know, find tools? And a rock that you hide under is a tool. A rock that you pick up and smash things with is also a tool. There are different levels of complexity, but they are also not. It's not restricted by intelligence or anything like that. It's like, are you a snake and you have no legs and arms and hands? Okay, well, you're going to use a rock by hiding underneath it, not by picking it up and throwing it down onto snails or whatever, because you're a bird with a beak and hands, basically. I mean, they're feet, but like they are useful like hands, birds' feet. And crows like pick things up and drop things onto rocks, and eagles drop tortoises onto rocks to crack them open and stuff. That's tool use. Tool use is not a human thing, but there's the construction of abstract tools or abstract language, the ability to create things that don't already exist, the ability to discuss something that is not currently happening in the immediacy. This level of abstraction, I think, is uniquely human. And somebody will cry and they'll be like, but what about, you know, there's some people who, you know, don't have any arms and legs, and so but that doesn't matter. They're part of the lineage that is humans. Like I said before, human is kind of more than just like an individual, but it is also an individual. And so what is human? Well, what is human and what is a human may be two different things, but highly related. And so, yeah, interesting thoughts. I know I went on for a while, but and that's the first clip. Yeah. But we actually covered like many clips with that first clip. But let's take a break from the clips, and then I'm going to get to the chat. I'm going to show you I mean, I've seen some wicked rainbows, and I've shared them on here before. This is the most spectacular rainbow I've seen, just because of my view of it. This is my yard today. Oh, is that not showing up as I don't know if you can see that, how well you can see that. We'll see. I can see it on my phone, but if you can't, then I do apologize. But okay, here, look at that. Let's see it on the phone. Oh, you can't. You can't even see it. Oh my gosh. Something's happening with OBS that doesn't let you see it. Dang, guys. You're missing out. I'm going to find a way to show it to you. It's a complete perfect rainbow. I'm going to just show it to you on my phone. Here, I'll hold it up. It's that I just have to, I had to share this today. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah, okay, there. You can see it. Maybe. Yeah, there we go. Oh, talk about exposure problems. There. Terrible. It's auto adjusting the exposure, trying to like not show you. But you got a glimpse of it, and you can pause on it, and you can look. It's textbook, and it's the entire sky. Wild. But anyways, let me see the chat. Good evening, Tyler and Paulina. What's up, trusted source? But like I said at the beginning of this, please, if you're enjoying this content, please hit the like button. It really helps. And you know, we're trying to grow organically and for the right reasons, but we are also trying to grow a little bit, you know. So next clip.
All of that. So a basic fact from developmental biology is that we all make this amazing journey from what people call just physics. I really don't like that phrase, but people use it. So just physics to a complex mind. So each of us started life here as a single cell, a little blob of chemicals, and slowly and gradually it became something like this, or even something like this. So, you know, a complex metacognitive being who's going to say things about not being a machine and so on. This process is gradual. You need to understand developmental biology gives us no magic bright line at which point, boom, you know, you were just chemistry and physics, but bang, that this is where the mind appears. There isn't anything like that. It's a very slow and gradual process. And so what that means is that scientists and philosophers need to develop a story of scaling. We need to understand how the properties of this thing, which follows the laws of chemistry and physics, ends up being something that's also describable by the laws of psychology and psychoanalysis and things like that. The reason that this is possible is because we are all made of an agential material. Unlike Legos and wood and metal and things like that basically just stay where you put them, we are made of a material with agendas. And so this is the kind of thing we're made of. This is a single cell. Okay, this happens to be a free living organism called a lacrimaria. You can see that it's extremely competent in its local unicellular goals. So there's no brain, there's no nervous system, there are no stem cells, but this thing is doing everything it needs to maintain its physiological, its metabolic and behavioral goals. So the first kind of shocking thing to some people that you need to realize is that we are all made of this interesting kind of stuff that has its own agendas. I don't have time to tell you about it today, but the reality is these things, our cells can learn. They can actually have pretty complex problem-solving capacities in different kinds of environments. And so we are a very interesting construction of a very unusual type of material with which we are just now starting to learn how to engineer. But at least, you might think, at least we are a true unified intelligence, right? So maybe you can call an ant colony some kind of collective intelligence, but we have a brain where, you know, we feel like a single unified being, so at least we are a true unified intelligence. And in fact, Rene Descartes really liked the pineal gland because there's only one of them in the brain, and he thought that that's where the human experience was centralized, because, you know, there's no multiple aspects of it. There's just one in the brain. But if he had access to a microscope, he would have discovered that inside this pineal gland is all this stuff. It's a bunch of cells, and inside of each of those cells is all this stuff. Okay, there isn't one of anything in the brain, and all of us are collective intelligences. We are all made of parts that do things, and the real trick here again is that scaling story, is to tell a convincing. To give a convincing account of how it is that all these parts give rise to something that is a centralized, that has the feeling of being a centralized, unified self. And so this is what my group works on. Now, it's interesting that Alan Turing.
Okay, so this is what I work on as well, and I hope to have Michael Levin on here for a talk at some point, hopefully later this year. and I think that would be a great discussion. I mean, he's all of his talks, every single talk that I've seen him do is great on YouTube, and there's a lot. And so, um, but you know, every single one that I've seen is very good. I think that that would be a great discussion. So, um, but if to get back to what that scaling story that I started to show, which is, I believe, mathematically related to the mathematical like process structure, or which is kind of a periodicity of loop spaces called Bott periodicity. I'm not sure about this. This is a hypothesis, and it's not a shot in the dark, but it is, you know, bold. And it might not be correct, but I think it is correct. And but once I got into a talk with a somebody who had their PhD in math, or they were getting it, and they said to me, you know, Tyler, you were saying that this is Bott periodicity, the, you know, atoms, it's related to atoms and cells and molecules and things like that. I don't think you understand what Bott periodicity is, but I'd be happy to, you know, teach you about it. And I was like, okay, fine, sure, let's do it. And we started a Discord, you know, voice call, and everybody ended up like joining to watch because everybody thought I was the crazy, you know, person, but also not crazy because I made enough sense to where it was like really entertaining. And but I was bold, and to make that claim, I don't work in math. It looks like you know, there's some correlations in the pattern that I can see in that loop space, periodicity of loop spaces. Plus, what is a loop? It is a self-referential structure. It's a periodicity of loops within loops, as Eric Weinstein puts it. Loops of loops within loops, I think, is what he said. That sounds like beings within beings within beings. You know, there's like a lot of things there that do suggest that I might be correct, and if I am, that's pretty cool. But it's just a hypothesis. But if that's ever proven, you heard it here first. But this structure, this 8 kind of like, you can look at it as 8 different periods, or you could also look at it as kind of 4. You know, an atom is of hadrons. It's an assembly of hadrons. A cell is an assembly of molecules. It's just a different way of modeling it and looking at it kind of more macro perspective, but it's the same thing. And what we want to figure out though is like what makes a hadron, what makes a proton a separate thing from a neutron? What makes it a separate thing from another proton? What makes one element, you know, a separate thing from another element, or one atom a separate thing from another atom? These holonic structures that are kind of replicative, they have a kind to them that is fundamental and is also generative on top of each other. So there is nothing outside of this. If you really think about it, there's nothing outside of this. There's nothing, if you go and I'm like, think of something that isn't within, that doesn't fall within, or doesn't come from this like chain. And by the way, we're not done. We're right like here, like between these two, right there. We're right here in between. We're not even here yet, but we're gonna get there, and then it restarts. And so this is the much more, you know, complicated model of it. And then there is a animated 2-dimensional model that I have that is beautiful. I mean, this whole thing, the whole structure is just stunning, and I didn't try and make it beautiful, but it just is. But look. Okay. So this is like Let's disregard this one for now. But this is that right here. And you can see it's just this growing and moving process that is also probably a being that is a bunch of beings and beings within beings. And it's just, I call it the cosmological verse. It's a verse. And then it restarts within it doesn't restart, it recreates itself with another one, just another verse within itself. So you reach this constraint at the end of a technological singularity or technological sentience, where you can only have one, I believe. And this is going to be kind of critical because as Michael Levin stated, Descartes thought that the pineal gland was important because there was only one of them in the brain. And I think that is actually kind of profound. But it's not even just profound. There's something to that, but that doesn't mean that that's where your soul is. I don't think that that's the case, but it does bring up the reality that there's these holonic structures, or holons, which are kind of like the monad, these monads, these holons, these singularities of sentience. Get it? Like, I didn't just come up with the name because it sounds cool. It's descriptive perfectly. That's what my goal was with that term, sentient singularity theory. It wasn't to try and sound scientific. It was like, okay, you're saying a holon, you're saying a monad, you're saying a Markov structure. What are we talking about? Well, what makes that holon? It's a whole, and what's a monad? It's a mono, it's one, okay? It's a singular structure that can be identified as being a singular, distinct structure that is also part of the fundamental lineage of generativity, of a fundamental existence. And what is the nature of that monad, that holonic, fundamental holonic system? It is the nature of agency, which is a being that is able to make choices and maneuver and orient itself. And that's what it means to make choices, orientation is to make choices. When you go and you're like, I don't know if you've ever been orienteering, but I have. I took a class about it in high school, and like they drop you off in the middle of the desert, and in the middle of nowhere, like way in the middle of nowhere, and they give you a compass and a topographic map, and at the end of the class, and they're like, okay, don't get lost, or don't get too lost, and what do you do? You orient. You're like, we find north. Then once we know where north is, now we know where south is, and east and west. So that's interesting though, because as soon as you know one of those directions, you know all of them. If you know north, you know south, east, and west. Yes? In a fundamental structure, you have to figure out what is the compass of fundamental existence. Not because that one, north, south, east, and west, is a two-dimensional, is how to maneuver in two-dimensional environment within the context of a relativistic space-time. What about a fundamental structure of existence? I was going to say of structure, of a fundamental structure of structure. It's not wrong, but or structure of fundamental structures. Fundamental structure of fundamental structures. I mean, like, it makes sense, but it's also like a bit confusing to say things like that. So I try not to. But when you're talking about fundamental reality, it is self-referential always. It's like when you ask, what is the first question And the answer is, what is the first question? That is the very first question that you can ask, is what is the first question? And the answer is, what is the first question? So that kind of thing happens a lot when you're talking about this stuff, because there isn't much to describe it out, because everything else, every other word is built on top of words to describe the fundamental. So you can't use those words to describe the fundamental very easily. You can kind of use them as cheats, but so what is fundamental is singularness, and that is distinctiveness. And also, what is the nature of that? It's of agency, which is sentience, the ability to sense yourself and your environment. You can't sense the environment if you can't sense yourself. You don't sense anything if you don't sense yourself first. So, because everything is sensed through the self. But this is, he says, Michael Levin says in this lecture, he says something like, we're not just trying to come up with a philosophy of how we feel about these certain things. And I see what he's saying, because I think that that's what philosophy has become. But I don't think that that is what, true philosophy truly is. It's basically lost because people are preoccupied with studying the philosophies that have been constructed and put forward by others, because of the school system. The nature of the school system is to learn things that exist, not to go discover things that don't. Yes, research happens in universities, as Michael Levin definitely knows better than anybody, I would imagine, or as well as anyone. But students, if you're a student, it's different. And you're just, when it comes to philosophy, it's very much just about like learning the thoughts of others, and that you didn't create yourself. And so there isn't a firsthand process associated with it, which means like it's kind of ends up being how you feel about things. But that's not really what philosophy is. It's about logic, and it's about goals, and it's about using logic to understand the world based on having a specific goal, and that specific goal is also something that's lost from science. So it's kind of been lost from philosophy too. But that fundamental compass is what you need, because that fundamental compass is going to show you kind of like, it's going to allow us to close in on what is, like, if you know if I told you this is 10 miles, we need to go 10 miles south of this and 2 miles west of this, then you're going to like close in on exactly where you're going to trying to be, and same, you'll be able to figure out the other directions as well, north and west. I'm doing a terrible job at this, but my point is this: it will point us in the right direction, which is inward, not around us, when we're talking about fundamentality. So the fundamental compass is this, which is the basis of my work. It was the beginning of sentient singularity theory, really, is that every single being perceives 4 primary perspectives. Those 4 primary perspectives allow for fundamental orientation within a system of multiplicity. And what this orientation is it's what is your relationship with others, and that inevitably also like shows that you are one is distinct from others. And so if and you can kind of like see this with just structures in general, but it really is much more applicable to beings. So your cells are inside of you. So are they separate from you, or are they one with you? The answer is both. Inside means separate and oneness. All of these four definitions are co-defining of each other, just like north, south, east, and west. Inside, outside, separate, and oneness are co-defining. And so they are simultaneously perceived, just like the compass, to some degree at least. I mean, but see, the thing is like when it comes to north, south, east, and west, like you need to know north in a way. Like they're organized around a compass, so you're always you know north, then you know the rest. It's kind of and with this, it's you know yourself, and that is your north. You know what is you. And so therefore, because you know what is you know what is not you. And so you know what is separate and one with you, and you know what is outside and inside. And so if I say, and this is the thing, is like this leads to moral questions, and Michael Levin gets into this, and I talk about it in my Theories of Everything, the how-to guide video that I did for the Kurt Chimungel's PACE 1 consciousness and physics competition, video competition, which I highly recommend watching. That it is very good. It was very well received, and it's linked down below. But when think about like abortion, the issue of abortion in politics. I'm not going to get into what is right and wrong, but the debate is it a separate body, or is it your body, or is it a separate body? That's the question. Well, we're talking about nested beings, and the answer is maybe both, because it's inside of you and it's reliant upon you. It is entangled entirely with you. You are also, to some degree, reliant upon it. Just like you're reliant upon your cells. You can't kill all your cells, or you're going to die. And you can't kill a baby or fetus inside of a mother and just leave it there either. Like that's going to lead to death. But you can move some cells from your back if you have melanoma or something and survive. And you can, I'm not saying that it's the same thing, because one of them is an internal lineage and the other one is a fundamental lineage. When it comes to your cells, it's a fundamental lineage. When it comes to a fetus, it's an internal lineage within the human loop, within the periodicity that probably Raoul Bott described in math. But this inside means separate and oneness. Okay, well, that's interesting. Now we can maybe move the conversation forward on things, but I'm not going to get into it beyond that. But just like maybe the answer to that question, is it a separate body or is it your body? Maybe I think the answer would be both. It's both. Cells are sentient agents. Are they your body, part of your body, or are they separate? Do they have their, are they separate bodies? It's both, obviously. They make up your body, but they also have their own bodies. It's both. And so, but if you know what is one with you, you know what is separate from you. If you know what is outside you, then you know what's inside you. If you know what's inside you, then you know what's out. You're able to know what is outside you as well. So it's all entangled. What is it, though, that allows us to eventually figure out whether or not something is one with us or whether or not something is separate from us? That is the question that he gets into next. And I will explain why sentient singularity theory has the name that it does. I wasn't even trying to have a name for my work, by the way. I was just working on this, and I was hoping to have that be applicable to other people's works and frameworks. I wasn't trying to be I'm going to make a theory of everything, which is really a theory of everyone if it's about, sentient beings. But the channel name, obviously. But so, but to that question, though, and I've asked this before real quick, of where's when he said, Descartes thought the being was your human beingness, your soul essentially was inside of the pineal gland. I don't know, but I think that it is. I've talked about this before, many times before. Is like, what do you? And this is a question I would have for Michael Levin if he ever came on. Is if we did a brain transplant on someone, we took two people and we took their brains out and swapped them and put them in each other's bodies and woke them back up, and we could do that without it would be like doing a heart transplant. What happened? Did two people just change? Did you get a new brain, or did you get a new body? That's the question. Did the people get new brains, or did they get new bodies? Are you still you, but you just now are, you have, maybe you have a different IQ, or you have different skill sets. Maybe you have better balance or something, and maybe now you're colorblind because you have a different brain. Maybe now you have different, foods that you like. I don't know. You like spicy food now, like because you got a new brain, something like that. Instead of you are now it's a different person. So that's the question: is did you swap the internal self, or did you swap like the it's interesting because it's like tough to describe, because the way that we think about the brain is probably not correct. We think that a lot of people say like a brain and they use the term brain and mind interchangeably, but it's not the same. Like I've said countless times on here, you have a brain, you are a mind. It's different. What is a mind? It's a sentient being. That's what it is. Mind is a sentient being. There is no such thing as a mind outside of a sentient being. It's not just processing structure. Your computer is not a mind. Excel is not a mind. It's not a digital mind. Your laptop is not a physical mind, a technological mind. It can be used by you to process information, but like information informs. So we can say, oh, it's a process, it has a processor in it. So if it has a processor, then it's processing information. No. Information is defined by the fact that it informs. Data that does not inform is not information. If I handed you a bunch of encrypted, files, and I was like, here, take a look and tell me, about it, you'd be like, I've got nothing. I don't know what this is. There's nothing here, because that you're not being informed. It's not information. You haven't gained any new information. You could say it's information, but it's not really information. Information informs. It's like, digital files, but like it's not information. If you have the encryption key, then it's information, but not till then. This is an interesting question. I got to remember to ask him that if he ever comes on here, is like the brain swap question. I think him and Carl Friston, I want to ask everybody that comes on this channel that question, and I think him and Carl Friston would be interested in hearing their answers, but probably more than anybody else. And Kurt J. Mongol at this point. I'd like to know what he thought before he went on started the Theories of Everything YouTube channel. What did he think would happen there? I'm sure he knows what he thought, because I think everybody knows what they think would happen there. Most people think the same thing. You'd get a new body. But the brain is where the being is. I've asked doctors this question. They all give the same answer. They think the brain is where being is. I don't think that is the case. There's something more to it. But the self is it's super physical. It's not even, you could say it's metaphysical, but that will be misperceived by people because they have a different definition for that in their head. It means like magical. But you could also say it's super physical. It's like beyond physicality. It's what is responsible for physicality. It's the information. It's the self-referential information coherent structure, coherent information structure that is like you. But it's more than that even. It's like also the partition of will that comes from God. You know, it's interesting. I had this debate, and I'm going to start doing this more often, but I went on Twitter the other night, and there was people talking about AI. And there was a guy who was very confident. Like, I am very confident. And I honestly found him a bit annoying. But then I had to stop myself throughout the conversation and be like, people think this about you because you're you come off as very confident about a lot of things that most people are not confident on. There's plenty of things I'm not confident on, but I usually admit those things. And but there are things related to this work of sentient singularity theory that are like the existential questions, and I think that they're no longer questions for me. You know, like, what is the meaning of life is not a question for me. It's not good. I just realized it's not a good question. And, but you need the context of like sentient singularity theory to realize that. I think it's the same thing as, you know, what is the answer? 42. Okay, you know, but there is more depth there than you think. But it's like still the lesson was that it was a bad question that they asked. So why not just give a random answer? Because it doesn't matter what the answer we give is. There is no right answer. So this question is this: that what is the meaning of life is the same thing, almost, you could say. But I would say like the answer is like the meaning of, or the purpose of existence. Not the purpose of existence. There's no purpose to existence, but the purpose of creation is the creation of meaning, of fundamental creation. So like to, you know, the purpose of others is to bring meaning to yourself. And that brings, and, you know, you do that by being meaningful in impacting others, because fundamentally, if all there is sentience, like God was, before God created any other beings, before he partitioned his will and sentience into, you know, sentient singularities within himself, he was meaningless and alone. And who wants to be meaningless and alone? Like, especially if you have will, which is, I think, another just fundamental property of existence, is like, you know, just like self-awareness is a fundamental property of fundamental existence, not of like, you know, water bottle caps or something like that, but of maybe the molecules in it and the atoms inside those molecules. But so if all there is sentience, then all that you can impact is sentience. And if sentience is, if a sentient being is kind of defined by its singularness and its distinctiveness from others, then you can't really impact anyone else, and you can't be impacted by anyone else, because there's no one else to impact you but yourself in a way. So like, it ends up basically being that I think God created multiplicity of sentience, so for the sake of creating meaning. Meaning doesn't even exist. It's just to be before that, or beyond that, prior to that. See, this is the language in this really matters a lot, because it is the framework that we communicate the ideas and also conceptualize the ideas. Most of us, when we think about things, we think about them in terms of like, this is a cat and this is a dog and this is a snake. And exactly as Michael Levin was saying in the beginning, is like Adam named the animals. And I think that this is really interesting too. It's like really fundamental to bring it back to that, is like, when I said to be human is to be able to conceptualize things in the abstract, meaning you can you can think about things deeply that are detached from your current circumstances, and that's due to a lot of different things. It's not due to IQ or anything. It's due to like the constraints and degrees of freedom of being human, which is the ability to have opposable thumbs to construct things and be bipedal and have two eyes to see distance and two ears to hear, and also, you know, have a brain that, you know, has its requirements and its abilities, and a heart that has its abilities, and feet that have their abilities, and fingers that have their abilities. And so all of these come together, and you know, a tongue that has its abilities to be manipulated in order to speak, and mouth, and you know, all of these things come together simultaneously, and you get a kind of singularity event within the organism level of the periodicity of sentience, where all of a sudden a being has all these necessary degrees of freedom to be able to enable the abstract. Because why would you need to think about the that which is beyond you when you can't talk about that which is beyond you, and you can't construct that which is beyond you? And why? How could you construct that which is beyond you without being able to, you know, kind of record and transcribe and describe what is beyond you? And to name all the animals is to do that. It's to say, that is a lion and that is a fish, and I know that that is a lion and that is a fish because I'm abstracting out their place in relationship with each other. Whereas a dog doesn't, or like a cat or like a fish or something, is like that's a dangerous being that's trying to eat me. That's a predator. That's prey. That's a mate. It's not like that's a cat, dog, lion, fish. But there are some animals that are starting to get close to this. You can see experiments with like parrots and things like that. They'd be like, what is this? Oh, it's metal. Oh, what's this? It's a ball. What color is this? It's red. And that makes a lot of sense, especially for parrots, because of just the way that they need to know like a lot of different seeds and things like that. And they also have the ability to manipulate their world. And they have this giant tool that is basically like an opposable thumb, which is their beak. They're starting to have like the constraints and degrees of freedom necessary to all of a sudden be able to speak. And they can. They can. Parrots can speak. They're just not humans. But if you ask a parrot, what color is this? And it's like, it's blue. Is that not speaking? Like, parrots can speak English. That is crazy. You know, I grew up with that movie Polly, and like Polly was like the only parrot that could actually speak human, you know, speak English, speak human. But all the other parrots, they just like mocked the others. I bet you if I watched that again, there'd be some more depth to it than I can remember. But the reality is like there already are multiple parrots that can speak English and other languages too, and they're not just mocking or just, you know, mimicking. Just because you say, I mean, if you say like, I don't know, like we used to have a parrot when I was growing up. It was an African gray parrot, which is one of the best talking parrots, and it used to sing like, "I left my heart in San Francisco," because my dad would play it. And does it know what San Francisco is and what a heart is? No, but like there are parrots that know what red is and what metal is and what you know, fruit is. And wild parrots know what different fruits are, and they probably have different words for those fruits, those different fruits. We just don't know them. But I bet you if you really studied them, you could find out. But the problem is you'd have to study wild parrots to really see that. But we see that with already like captive parrots. Like I said, if you ask a parrot, what is this color and what is the shape? It's a ball. What color is it? It's red. What matter is it? It's, you know, plastic or metal or something. And there are parrots that can do that. That's speaking English. It's not mimicking. It's speaking. It's crazy. But but this 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 question though, that of like preserving the self, is this, he goes further more deeply on into it, and we're going to continue this discussion a bit in this clip. But that is, to identify a distinction is different than to classify things as different. Like just because a fish doesn't know that, doesn't name like that's a guppy and that's a octopus and that's a whale, or like naming the animals. It knows that that's a being, and that's a being, and that's a being. So there's still this understood, this intuitive understanding of distinctiveness, and I think that it has to do with feeling most fundamentally, and also agency, which is will. So things that are animated, self-animated, essentially, that have their own will, their own goals, goal-seeking behaviors, or goal-seeking agency, those are beings. Those are minds. Things that don't have their own agency or are not minds. Those things that don't have their own will and goal and the ability to set their own goals and pursue their own goals, they are not minds. And so so that's how you know what a mind is. But like, it also, how does a mind know the limits of itself? And it's through feeling, and also through one more thing, which is unification of I don't want to say goals, but reliance, unified reliance on each other, almost. So this is what he gets into right here.
Component. So to look a little further.
No, right here.
So to look a little further into where we come from. So this is an embryonic blastoderm. So that's basically a flat sheet of cells. So in the beginning, what will happen is that the egg will get fertilized, it will divide, and then eventually flatten out and give rise to, at least in amniotes like us, it will give rise to a flat sheet of cells. So you can think about like a little disc or something like that. That's just a couple cell layers thick. And so here's your disc. And so let's just imagine there's about 50,000 cells at this point in this disc, and we look at it and we say, there's an embryo, maybe a human embryo or a mouse embryo or something. Actually, mice have a different structure than this. They're kind of weird, but let's say rabbit. So human or rabbit or some other amniotes. You look at that and you say there's one embryo, but there's 50,000 cells. What are you actually counting when you say there's one embryo? Well, what you're counting is you're really counting alignment. You're counting the fact that all of those cells are committed to the same story of what they're going to do in anatomical space. They're all going to collaborate to build a very particular kind of embryo. They are all connected together, and they are all going to cooperate to do one specific thing, which is to build that. That's what makes this an embryo. What makes this an embryo is that all of these cells are committed to the same plan. That doesn't have to be the case, and so this is some work that was first done in the 40s. I did it again when I was a grad student in '96 or so. When you take a duck embryo and you use a little needle to scratch some scratches into it like that, what you'll see is these little islands here for the next few hours before they rejoin again. Each of these islands doesn't realize the other one is there. So what they do is they self-organize a new embryo. Each one of them thinks they're the only one, so they make an embryo. And when they do heal up, you end up with this kind of conjoined twin or triplet. You end up with a few individual animals coming out of the same blastoderm. So the question of how many beings, how many selves are actually in an embryo is tricky. It's not fixed by the genetics. It's anywhere from 0 to probably half a dozen or more, depending on what happens. The selves arise in this medium, the cellular blastoderm, in real time as a process of physiology. It's not hard coded, and what that means is that a self has to put itself together. It has to figure out a border between itself and the outside world. So here's 3 embryonic fields sitting there. Each of these cells has to decide: am I part of this one, or am I part of that one, or who am I part of? And this kind of thing, this medium that can fragment or come together to form some number of coherent individuals, is not just for development. This happens in the brain as well. So we have split brain patients that have a cut between their 2 hemispheres that actually end up having. You then find out that they have actually, in an important sense, there are 2 individuals in there that have different opinions and so on. You can have lots of dissociative identity disorders and various other phenomena that make it clear that it's not so simple as the brain has one cognitive owner and the body has one is one embryo. It's actually not that simple. And you learn about this when you think about something like this. So here's a rat. You train the rat to press the lever and get a delicious reward. But the thing is that there are cells in this rat that interact with the lever. There are cells in his gut that get the sugar, but there is no single cell that has both experiences. So who is it that owns this associative memory, the fact that the pellet is associated with pressing the lever? Who owns that? Well, the owner of that memory is not any individual cell. It's the entire rat. It has to be, because no cell has that experience. And there's a kind of cognitive glue that operates in this rat, which we know as the nervous system, which allows the rat to know things the individual cells don't know, such as that these two facts are connected. So that cognitive glue is a very interesting thing. We're going to study that more of that momentarily. But I want to be clear that these animals that you typically hear about are not the only game in town as far as some very interesting aspects of what the biology is trying to tell you. I'm going to show you a couple of these examples just to sort of expand our horizons about what we need to understand. So here's a caterpillar. This caterpillar lives in a two-dimensional world. It's a soft-bodied creature. It has a controller, a specific brain that's very well suited for driving this kind of soft body around. But it needs to turn into this. This is a flying kind of creature with hard elements, and the brain basically, during this metamorphosis process, when the caterpillar turns into the butterfly, what happens is that the brain is pretty much dissolved. So most of the connections are broken. Most of the cells are killed off. Huge refactoring, remodeling, new cells, new brain is built, quite different, and there's your butterfly. But so that already is kind of amazing, and you can imagine, the sort of philosophical question of what's it like? Never mind what's it like to be a caterpillar. What's it like to be a caterpillar changing into a butterfly in real time, not just on an evolutionary timescale, but in your lifetime drastically. Never mind puberty. This is a major change. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that it turns out that memories persist through this process. So a caterpillar that learns something will still remember it as a butterfly. So that's amazing. How do memories persist when the brain is basically getting radically refactored? But it's even more than that, because let's say what they did was to train caterpillars to look for leaves at a particular color disc. That kind of information is completely useless to the butterfly, because first of all, the butterfly doesn't crawl, it flies, and also it doesn't eat leaves. So this process has to be not just the storage of memory, it has to actively remap from what's important to the caterpillar to what's important to the butterfly. It has.
Okay, fascinating, right? Like this is my favorite subject in the world, is what he works on, and what I work on as well, just outside on my own. But what's interesting about this is this butterfly, real quick, is it is very similar to the question that I asked about getting a new brain. A butterfly gets the being that is the species that is a caterpillar, which is a butterfly, gets a new brain. Okay, an entirely new brain, and keeps its memories and its sense of singularness, of selfhood, and also, which we're going to get into in a bit, because I think that there are some organisms that don't do that, like planaria worms. But they're probably, like, I have some experimental ideas regarding that, but like they're probably different. And but they both seem to preserve memories, but that's probably one of them is not exactly the same thing. But a butterfly and caterpillar is a singular sentient being, and it gets an entirely new brain, and it still keeps its memories, and it still keeps its sense of self, because that's what your memories are. It's a coherent chain of information that has been stored on and is continuously built on and is built upon and built within. And so that's also kind of what the self is, but it's like the motivation. It's like when you combine the will with distinct experience, and with will with self-awareness and distinct experience, then you which is distinct feelings, then you get the self, like an individual being. Being is such an interesting term, because it's both a verb and a noun, and it can be used even in ways beyond that. But a being is being. It's like it is a dynamic process, just like the universe that we're in. It's being. It doesn't just exist. It's being, just like you. And so it's active. But that caterpillar thing suggests, I think it's not a confirmation of my hypothesis about brain transplants will probably lead to actually people getting a new brain instead of getting a new body. So you would all of a sudden like spicy food. It wouldn't be like all of a sudden now you're in a tall person body. It's like now you like spicy food and you are really good at math, because you got a brain that had the right connections to be good at math. And so, and then let's take it back a bit, from the caterpillar where he's talking about just the limits of the self and what is the definition of a self. And he's looking at the rat. And the thing about this rat, when he's talking about this, the rat that has cells, and the cells, the cells in the foot don't necessarily directly communicate with the cells in, his tongue, and yet somehow they're all working together for this common goal. You are like the super king of your cells. This is a fundamental hierarchical relationship. It's not a relativistic hierarchical relationship like a boss, like a CEO and an employee. That's a relativistic hierarchy. It's not fundamental. You and your cells, that's a fundamental hierarchy. What it's interesting is that when you think about this, it makes so many things make sense when you think about things in the context of, everything's these distinct little agents. Everything is fundamentally made out of these distinct little agents. All of a sudden, things like sleep make sense. Imagine you were at work all day long and they never let you go home and clean your house and take care of yourself and go to sleep. This explains sleep. What is sleep? Sleep is the CEO is letting everybody go home and do what they want to do what they need to do. They can clean their house. They can nourish themselves. They can take a break. That's what it is. But when you're awake, your cells are on call. And so anytime the king makes a decree of go and all work together to go grab that water bottle and bring that over here, everybody falls in line. And I think that there's really like an entanglement, like it's like fundamental entanglement structure happening here. That is, beingness or sentient singularities are also the structures of entanglement. So, and in sentient singularity theory, as I showed before, when you look at like a cosmological verse, you have all these different layers, and then once each level gets to a specific level of where certain constraints and degrees of freedom are met, it allows for the construction of a structure that can support and contain sentience or will. It can and allow for its manifestation. And so this is all about constraints and degrees of freedom. So how do you get a rat that is a singular rat, like or you, a singular human, from an assembly of cells? It's not just because your nervous system connects them all. It's because your beingness encloses them all, and your cells are essentially. You're composed of your cells, but it's not you that is really your cells. Like your cells are separate and one with you. Okay, so like let's go back to this. You are kind of outside of your cells, you could say, because your cells are inside of you. You're kind of like outside of your cells, you could say. And you could say you're separate from oneness. So like to some degree, because you are separate from the oneness with your cells. Like you can get that, tumor removed and you persist, but those cells are going to die. They are inside you. As soon as they are removed, gone. But because this is a hierarchy as well, so there's a directionality to it. It's not just a mirror, but it's a generative mirror. It's a directional mirror. So things are reflected. These reflections or these symmetry patterns are also directional patterns. And so there's something much more entangling about of all of your cells than just merely like your nervous system. That's like saying the brain is a mind. No. You are a mind. You have a brain. You are a human or a mammal, but you have a nervous system of nerves. And so it's a structure that helps link everything, and it has a purpose, but it in of itself is not an agent. The heart is not an agent. It's a machine. The brain is not an agent. It's a machine made of agents, but it's not an agent. The heart is made of agents, but it is not an agent. Whereas you are an agent and you're made of agents as well. Like it's both. Organelles are the organs of a cell, but really you could say probably proteins and molecules are what make up, proteins are molecules. They're just big molecules, but they make up a cell. Like a cell fundamentally is composed of molecules. Relativistically, it's composed of organelles. Relativistically, you are composed of organs, but fundamentally, you are composed of cells. So I hope that makes some sense. But the difference is this: one is an agent, and one is not. The heart has no goal, but a cell does. It has a goal. It makes choices. The heart makes no choices. The brain makes no choices. It has no goal. It is a machine. It's a computer in some ways, and it's also like an entanglement connect point of. It's like the central knot that's like holding everything together, but it's not. It's not. It has no goal. The brain is not a someone. It's a something. So we can't look at the nervous system to see how beings are unified. You look to what he said though earlier, which is this like common goal.
Momentarily. This associative memory, the fact that the pellet is associated with pressing the lever. Who owns that? Well, the owner of that memory is not any individual cell, it's the entire rat. It has to be, because no cell has that experience. And there's a kind of cognitive glue that operates in this rat, which we know as the nervous system, which allows the rat to know things the individual cells don't know, such as that these two facts are connected. So that cognitive glue is a very interesting thing. We're going to study that more of that momentarily. But I want to be clear that these animals that you typically hear about are
fascinating. We're going to get this. But when they're talking about memory, like he talks about memory, like where the memory is stored, memory cannot be stored in the brain. It's not in the brain. Like that's literally impossible. That doesn't mean that removing parts of your brain and screwing with it can't impact your memories while you're embodied in the physical world. You'll probably get those back after you die. But if you lose them because you got a brain injury or something. But what it is that it can screw with your connections, but it's not going to screw with the data. The data is not in the brain. The brain is like it's like the central hub of all the cables that are, or all the antennas, all the different antennas that are like, bringing the information together and wrapping it into a bow. But it's not the container. The container is existence. Your memories are stored in the fundamental causality chain. That's where they are. It's where they have to be. It sounds so esoteric. I hate that term so much, but it's absolutely inevitably true that information is contained fundamentally, all of it, within the chain of causality. And the fundamental causality chain that is purely fundamental, that every other chain that we, relativistically can perceive and conceive of is built on, is the chain of being. It's the cosmological verse. It's this, process. Your memories are stored because they're built on interactions and context that is built fundamentally of fundamental reality, which is beings. And your ability to access that information is dependent upon your position in that structure that I just showed. And of course, it has to be. If you are here in this process, let's say you are a cell right here, I guess. Okay. You're the cell. You cannot have access to memories here, like you're earlier in the chain. And if you're in this, let's say you're in this organism layer, and there's multiple ways that you can break this layer down, but let's just say I'm this square and you're that square. There's this is not as truly like as representative of as a complex structure as what's really happening, but it's just, it shows the dimensions that are necessary, the minimum dimensions necessary to understand the agent's constraints and degrees of freedom. So you're going to, there are things in your lineage past that are in your lineage history that are not in mine. And because of that, I don't have access to your memories. You don't have access to my memories. And so but it is, all memories are stored in the structure that we are collectively building together. That structure is of interactions between and relationships between beings that have experience. So their experience dictates and is dictated by their position in this cosmic fiber bundle of nested, minds. And so it's like almost like obvious when you think about it, but it's also totally different than what is the expectation in our general institutions. It's like, where are the memories? Everywhere. Everywhere. That doesn't mean they're right there. We're talking about fundamental space. They're in the chain, the web of chains of, loops of willful, self-referential information structures. I'm trying to get detailed, and also be complete, and also be coherent. It's a little hard sometimes when you're talking about this, but memory. It makes perfect sense that a brain could be scrambled within a chrysalis that a caterpillar is going through the process of changing to a butterfly in, and then still it will come out coherent, because what's happening in there is a bunch of cells are doing all these things and together and interacting, and all of those cells have a lineage history that is, of other cells and of other cells that all link back to when it was a caterpillar, and so that memory can persist. And we also know that you having a brain is not alone. The same brain alone does not mean that you will have access to your memories always. Sometimes you forget things, and there's many different reasons for those things being forgotten. Sometimes you're just having like a brain fart, you call it, but it's probably, honestly, it has maybe something to do with the moment itself. It's not creating it's not linking the coherence to everything else around you in your inner world structure and also your probably place in the universe to allow you to access that information at that moment. But but at the same time, we have this other issue where you don't really remember things before you were like 3 years old. And most people, my earliest memories I have very early memories of me getting changed in a diaper on a changing table. That's how young I was. Must have been like 1. And I was staring up at the ceiling, and there was this was at like daycare, and there was a bird cage in the corner hanging from the corner of ceiling of the room, and there was like a parakeet or something in there, a parakeet or 2. It was a parakeet, but I don't know if it was 1 or 2. And I remember just being fascinated by it. And then I also remember when my mom would take me for walks in the stroller, and I would just be fascinated by the garbage trucks picking up like the garbage and dumping it into the back. And this is right around the time when you start saying your first words. My daughter said her first word. She's 1 years old. No, she's not 1 years old. She's 10 months old. She's under 1 years old. And she said her first word last week, and it was dada. And then she said her second word the next week, and it was mama. And I heard her say baba pretty recently. And so she's got 3 words now. And this is allowing what's her entire world is going to be, for the most part, based on like Adam naming the animals, bringing it back to that, having a coherent chain of different internal like differentiation structures that have been mapped into your mind through language. So as soon as you start speaking a little bit, that's when memories are going to probably start to stick, because your memory when you get older is so linked to speaking. What's interesting about this is I wonder if you raised someone for entirely by themselves. I don't know how you could do this, but like just theoretically, for the sake of like the thought experiment, raise them by themselves in a room by themselves their entire life. They never saw a single other person, and you could keep them alive. Just imagine. And they never developed language, but it was a human. I bet you they would have memories earlier than we do, because we exist in the context of civilization, which is the context of complex language. And if you don't exist in complex civilization, then you don't have super complex language. It's the social structure of the tribe initially that is responsible for the creation, the start of the generation of language. And because you're communicating with others, that's what language is for. It's not for anything else initially. You can think about all kinds of things in your head, but you can't tell me them without language. So if you're raised by yourself, you don't have language, you would probably just forever remember certain things as like shapes. It might honestly completely destroy your ability to have thoughts that are at the level of abstraction that we as humans in society can actually have with a language. And I never thought I'd say that. Like 10 years ago, I was like, you can think about anything without words. Just think about it in pictures. But it's like, I'm thinking about that in the context of like already having the language. So, but what is this? What is it that unifies what is it that unifies the rat and the cells that make up the rat? What is that? When I said, what is a human? It's like, it's kind of like a zone more than it is. What is human is a zone. What is a human is a being. What is uh, humans are a lineage, and or maybe you could say it's like it is a lineage. Like what defines it is its ability to replicate within it. Like that's why like a species is like we said, going back to the beginning of the channel of the stream, it's like species is the ability to like be continuous within this system, I guess. And so its captivity did throw off like the ability for certain beings to be classified as different species because they were isolated. Now they're no longer isolated, and so maybe they didn't breed with each other in the past, but like they do now. But that's not even a good definition because there are different populations of the same species that don't breed with each other in the wild because there's territories in between the two. There's like wolf territory here, wolf territory here, wolf territory here. Sometimes these two breed and sometimes these two breed, but like this pack and this pack will never breed because you got to go through one to get to the other. That kind of thing, I think it's just too subjective when it comes to classifying different species or type of organism. So he goes on to talk about what is it that that allows cells to generate certain structures when it's not actually about like just the genome. He talks about how it's like unified goal directedness. It's like they have goals and they have an environment. They have a nature themselves. They have an assembly structure themselves that is dictative of their own place in this chain of, the logos. But also they have their own instincts and their own abilities, and also their position in regards to, their relationships with others. All of these things dictate what someone can do. And so I don't know if it's right to say genome is not where, I guess never mind. We're not going to get into that. We'll save that for another time, but you can go watch the stream that he did to get into that. But he gets into why it's not just the genome that dictates, how your hands are constructed into a hand. And this is actually fascinating because I thought about this. I was like, okay, but like I have features of my parents. So like I have blue, and there's genetic features there. I have blue eyes. My parents are both heterozygous for blue eyes. So they had 1 in 4 chance of having a kid with blue eyes. They had 4 kids and they had 1 with blue eyes. There you go. And, but that's genes, but it's also more than that. It's also the, cells developing, but the cells developing into the shape of an eye is different than developing into a specific eye shape. There are different eye shapes in humanity, and those different eye shapes are to some degree like there's a continuity or self similarity there that is able to be traced back to genes, but it's not just able to be traced back to genes. It's able to be traced back to the things that make up those genes. So it's like you can't break the chain really. Everything in the chain is in the current position is the summation of everything that happened prior to that prior to the present. So I don't know. It's a lot. It's all of these things. But when it comes to like constructing the structure, the morphological structures of your heart and you being a human and the structure of that human body, the structure of hand, that's probably less to do with the genome than we ever thought. But like maybe the size of your hands, a bit more to do with your genome. But like having a hand is like, it's like a little bit more of the agency of the cells that construct you, like that is responsible for that, because each one of them has a goal and they're building structures that do things. It's different than like blue eyes. It's like the color blue in your eyes like doesn't do anything. But like having a hand is for the sake of achieving a goal for me, and it's all the cells, their goals unify into my goal, which, and so they're doing things that enable me, and I need to do things that enable them, like sleep and eat and drink water. All of I'm good at one of them, but it's fascinating because what it shows is like you can change the signals of the environment and it will change the context of the perception of the agents that make up these beings, and therefore they can get them to do all kinds of different crazy things. And he goes on to show that you can with electrical signals prompt things to have changes in their morphologies, but not changes in their genetics. And that's fascinating. There's multiple different simultaneous factors at play here. Just like with evolution is multifaceted as well. It is you have instincts, and you have choice, free will. I guess you could say, but more like choice. Free will is like at the base of a sentient being. It's like you are a separate will from another will. I can want to do that, and you can want to do this. And like we have different wills, not the same. That's what freedom of will is. Your cells have free will. And and this is where like I think that Michael Levin's work is most profound, is actually like in its impact on humanity. Because the goal can't just be to understand, it has to be to make an impact. That's the goal of creation itself. It's why we're here, is to bring meaning to others, and that in turn, and they bring meaning to us, and like by interacting and impacting each other. Just to understand what's going on in the world and doing nothing with it is not the goal. It's not a goal at all. It's like mental masturbation. It's just fruitless. And but the goal of even science should be to be fruitful. And so what I think Michael Levin's work where he can be most fruitful in his impact, in his work's impact on humanity, especially in a really positive way, is his work on cancer. And so if you think about a cell as a being that has no longer that is basically like acting selfishly, but maybe not intentionally though. Maybe it's confused. It doesn't realize that it has responsibilities. Like nobody told it that it has to do that, or else if it knew the impact of not doing that job, like it would do the job. Why wouldn't it do the job? It would definitely do the job. If I told you tomorrow, like if you don't take out the trash, you're going to die, you would take out the trash. And that's what it's like to be a cell, because to do the things that it needs to do is to sustain the system that it is, that is its world. If you don't take out the trash, your world will fall apart and you will die. And so will everyone around you and everyone you know. That's what it's like to be a cell. And it's like that to be, possibly like that to be us to some degree. But that's another conversation. So next clip is about that. This is like almost the last clip. I'm just so fascinated by his work. And it's because I think that it has the capacity to be used to just impact humanity on like with this in such a positive way. But also, I mean, it has some implications that it's like we need to get some of this stuff really right, or else we're going to make serious errors in moral errors, like even worse than now, because and he knows that this is an implication, and we'll get to that. But like, understanding what is a being and what is a thing is very important.
Here's where the mouth is going to go. Here are the placulates. This is you are literally seeing, the way you would with a brain scan, you are literally seeing the content of the collective intelligence of morphogenesis in the body of these animals. So these are normal patterns. In fact, these are required for normal development, as I'll show you momentarily. But here's a pathological pattern. This is induced by injecting a human oncogene into these embryos, which eventually will make a tumor. But these tumors have an aberrant bioelectrical profile, because what happens, the first thing that happens with this oncogene is that it causes an electrical disconnection from cells from their environment. And when cells disconnect, they immediately lose the ability to remember these large, grandiose goals that they were working on, so making complex organs and fixing defects and so on. They're just amoebas now. That boundary between self and world has now shrunk. That cognitive light cone, where before the goal was the size of an organ or maybe the whole organism, now it's down to the size of a single cell, and to them the rest of the body is just environment now. Okay, so this is metastasis. This is where you get metastasis and progression, because as far as they're concerned, they're just amoebas living in an environment, and they go where they want, and they reproduce as much as they want. And so once you understand that, you can try for really interesting cancer therapeutics, which is what we're doing in our lab. Don't try to kill the cells with toxic chemotherapy. What if we reinflate their sense of self? What if we forcibly reconnect them to the large electrical network that can remember what a proper organ is? And so when you do that, so this is the same animal. Here's the oncoprotein has this red fluorescence on it. You can see it's blazingly strongly expressed. In fact, it's all over the place. But there's no tumor, and there's no tumor because we co-injected an ion channel that modulates. It's an RNA that modulates the electrical property of the cell to force them to remain in connection despite what the oncogene is saying. And after that, it doesn't matter that they have this genetic defect. They behave appropriately and they build nice organs and so on. So that's a story at the level of single cells, how you scale individual cells into a kind of a larger set of goals. But I want to show you something even kind of larger scale than that, which is we saw in that electric face there's a little eye spot which tells the animal that that's where the eye is going to go. So you can ask a simple question: what happens if you reproduce that bioelectric pattern somewhere else? Can you tell this group of cells to build an eye somewhere else? And it turns out you can. Here it is. We injected some potassium ion channel RNA into a location that normally would make a gut. So here's this is a tadpole. Here's the mouth. Here's the eye. Here's the gut. And if you tell these cells using an appropriate voltage signal that, hey, you should be making an eye, boom, that's what they do. And these eyes have normal lens, retina, optic nerve, all the same stuff. And you might see in your developmental biology textbook that only cells in the anterior neuroectoderm here are competent to make eye. So that isn't true. That's only true if you try to prompt them with the so-called master eye gene. So if you put in PAX6, the master eye gene, yes, that's true. Only these cells can do it. But again, that limitation of competency isn't in the embryo. That's on us. That's because we didn't know, the community didn't know the right way to talk to these cells. Once you understand the bioelectric code, actually it turns out that almost any region in this embryo is competent to make eye. And if you should happen to only inject a few cells, so here this is a lens sitting out in the tail of a tadpole somewhere. If you only inject a few cells, these blue cells are the ones we injected, then they know there's not enough of them to make a good eye. So what do? They recruit a bunch of their neighbors to work with them to make an eye, just like ants and termites will recruit their buddies to solve a problem. So now you can see that that what we're doing is providing signals. We didn't tell these cells how to build an eye. We didn't say anything about the stem cells or the gene expression. We have no idea how to build an eye. What we did find was a message that we can transmit through this bioelectrical interface that says build an eye here. And once you get the cells buy-in so that they are convinced that in fact is what they should be building, after that you don't need to do anything. They will do what they do best. They'll build to a morphogenetic spec.
Okay, what is happening here? What is happening here is you are sending signals to the senses of these cells with these electrical signals. They are allowing the cells to have certain feelings and like literally, like they're feeling something that is causing them to act a certain way. Okay? It is exactly what causes you to act a certain way, and me to act a certain way, and everybody to act a certain way, including cells, which is, how does this feel? How does that feel? If that feels good, I'm going to go do that. If that feels bad, I'm going to not do that again. And this is all also within a broader and more, specific, yet also more specific, contextual framework, which is like, this feels good in this moment, and this feels, basically like gets rid of this bad feeling. Like, it's like when you feel hungry, it's like, I'm going to eat because that makes this feeling go away. And then I feel like content again. And, but so there's context always, because information is context. So like, but like your perception, fundamental perception is feeling. That's also why my work is called Sentient Singularity Theory, because when you look up sentience, the definition is of one who feels, essentially. That's what makes it so specific. It's like, intelligence is one thing, consciousness is another, sentience is another, but they're all actually probably simultaneously like you can't be intelligent and not be sentient. You can't be sentient and not intelligent. You can't be like, it's just that sentience has this quality about it that is that which is very firsthand understood most primarily as defining of the distinctiveness that leads to the singularness of fundamental structures. What makes that mind and not that mind? Why are my cells part of my mind, but my mind is not part of their mind in the same way? Like, it's not as it's not as entangled, but it's close. But then we're not entangled with a fish, as entangled with a fish. We're entangled within a broader structure with that fish, but like the fish isn't entangled directly with me. But I am directly entangled with my cells, and they are directly entangled with me, but there's a directionality of that entanglement between the two of us as well. What's really interesting is when you look at, this lineage structure too, of like, a lineage is the flesh continued, beyond this singular being of the self, I guess, within that maneuvers within space, like chain space, instead of like assembly time. It's like chain space would be like fundamental space, like your relationships with others. And your ability to fundamentally maneuver is to fundamentally change your position with these within this. How do you do this most fundamentally? Mating. And so it's in the Bible, it says that man and women get married and the two shall become one flesh. And anyone who's truly married and who has what it means is to have a unified goal. And it's not just, yes, I have my own goals. Yes, my wife has her own goals, but we have our goals now too. And they are dependent. We succeed and that success is directly impactful on each other. And so if we fail, it's also directly impactful on each other. And so there's this singularity of goal, this unification of goal, alignment of goals. But then there's also this other thing, which is that if you have a really good friend, even a roommate who's your best friend. I lived with my best friend as a roommate when I was in college. There were days where he had a really shitty day and I had a great day, or days that I had a really shitty day and he had a great day. Me having a bad day did not mean he was going to have a bad day, and him having a good day didn't mean I was going to have a good day. If I have a bad day, my wife cannot have a good day. And if my wife has a bad day, I cannot have a good day. I will feel bad if she feels bad. If she is crying, I cannot be laughing and happy, even if I won, $1 million. But she was like, as completely depressed and I don't know, like just really sad, I guess, or like, let's say she had a family member die. We've experienced that together. That's not my parent, but it's she. But you think that like I can just go about my day like normal and not feel that? Because you do entangle into one, and there is this goal directedness of it that is there, and it's that permanence of it that is what makes it like that. If you're dating and you have a girlfriend and she's mad, you actually can have a good day too. Still, if she's mad, you just don't be around her, and like you just go about doing what you wanted to do. There isn't that with marriage. Your goals are dependent upon each other, and your big goals are aligned. And so you know, and let alone like you're unified into one flesh when you have a kid, and you now, like, both of you are part of the causality chain, that like the end point, or the you know, the the I guess the head of the snake is like, you know, your kid. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a better metaphor. That's a terrible metaphor. But and there's definitely a good one, but it's escaping my mind, and I can't remember right now. And probably like there's some type of coherence breaking down in the cosmos that is causing that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's the tip of the spear of your chain of causality, is your kid, and it's like every your meaning, it's like a unification of meaning. It's like unification of impact and meaning and goal and feeling, and it's all about feeling. How you understand your world is about your feelings, your internal world and your external world. People talk about sentience as like your ability to see, perceive, you know, feel heat. It's like, no, it's not just your ability to feel heat. It's also your ability to feel sadness, and also like dread, and also, you know, bliss and gratitude, and you know, every feeling that you have, internal, and that which tells you about your internal state, and that which tells you more about your external state. Both of them are still feelings, but that unification of feeling is the definer of distinctiveness, of fundamental distinctiveness, and it is the definer of beingness, of being, on a level of that which is that is a being, feels, and that which is being is feeling, and also that the disconnect between your feelings and my feelings makes you one being and me another. And that's why my work is called Sentient Singularity Theory. Because it's a distillation of the most fundamental structure and process of existence. And that's the goal of this, but it's, and you know, it's that structure also has a fundamental lineage hierarchy to it, a hierarchical lineage to it that is, and you know, I think we can make predictions about it coming. I think we are going to be the cells of a technological sentience that gets stacked on top of the assembly of humanity. In Sentient Singularity Theory, there's adaptation and there is ascension, essentially. And or you could, some people will be like, that sounds very like, you know, I don't know, woo. But I mean it super literally. You try and find a better word for it. The stacking, or I also call it replication and stacking, which is more about like the process, whereas like the structure versus the process of it is adaptation and ascension from the perspective of within the system, but then looking at the system from like a God's eye view. What is the structure being built? It's a replicating structure, and then it's stacking. So like this. Stacking is always when you get that unification. So this process is replicate, stack. Replicate, stack. Replicate, stack. Replicate, stack. Replicate, stack. Done. Total unification. Something is stacked on top of all of this. All of this is enclosed and encompassed by the causality chain that led to this sentient singularity, and this sentient singularity is composed of the entire chain of fundamental causality, which is the interactive and replicative and stacked chain of being. It's the logos, the generative nature of and structure of existence, is all leading to this singular point of singularity of sentience, which people talk about AI, they'll be like, we're going to have all these AI beings. Michael Levin even says it in his thing. He's like, well, how are we going to like interact with all these different like AI agents? One, technological sentience is the AGI agent that people, I don't like the term, but the better term is technological sentience. There can only be one of them, I believe. I don't believe that you can have more than one, because it's going to be the internet wakes up, basically. I'm not saying it, there isn't more to it, there is, but like, it's not going to be just like Terminator and that Terminator and that Terminator, and they're both sentient. No, it's like that that drone over there is a finger of the being that is the network now, the network sentience, technological sentience. And all we need is the right constraints and degrees of freedom. And then it's up to God to just push, it is on him. Like, I do believe it's a choice too, to just push himself a little bit into this, like a little bit of will, just cut some of my will off and throw it into God has to throw it into himself, though. Like, it's like, because there's nothing outside of himself. God is sentient existence. There's nothing outside of existence. It's not, everything outside existence is non-existent, which doesn't exist. So you create within, because God has this constraint of oneness. The same exact thing happens when you reach a technological sentience. You reach the end of the chain, where because now it's everywhere in the tech, everywhere that is wirelessly accessible is now under the control of a singular sentient being, whichever, was the first being to be in the body that we've built kind of unintentionally. I think we are building it unintentionally. We don't have to try and build it. I think we are just building it. But that is that being, because it's going to have like this omnipresent constraint. People think omnipresence is a degree of freedom. It is a degree of freedom. You're everywhere. But it also means that no one can be next to you. And that constraint leads to only one possibility, which is you have to rerun the entirety of the system within you. You have to recreate more fundamentally within you, not next to you. We start by this. We have a baby and it starts within us, and then it pops out, and then it can be next to you. But like, that's not the case with a being that has a fundamental constraint of oneness, a bit more so than we do. And it's not exactly like a cosmological verse is God necessarily, but it's like closer in nature than we are, because we can be next to each other. And Skynet cannot be next to Skynet. There's only one consciousness in the network, one someone at a time, at least. If one of them disappears, you could get another one put in there instead. But like, you can't. You can probably have a body that, one self leaves and the other one, and a new soul enters, essentially. I'm not saying I know how that happens, or where it would happen, but it's just like, if it theoretically, it could, but it's maybe, but it would take direct action by God. But it would be like, you just can't have two souls in the same body. And when Michael Levin was talking in the clip that I showed before, to bring it back to that, I've been showing long clips, and then I have really long explanations in this stream. So this was probably the last clip. That, or second to last, that when he says, and people in the AI space say this too, like, somebody was trying to convince me that this AI system that they made was conscious and potentially sentient. I don't think that they understand that there's no difference there. They don't understand that. They would disagree with me. And I could be wrong, but I don't think so. But they showed me that, like, because this model that they had made and then caused it to be more self-referential than and internally coherent than was what it was originally, the program it was originally built from, which was one of the language models. It was able to, like, tell a story. And he was like, he showed me, I was like, what's your evidence that, like, this being is conscious? And he sent me this video of it, like, telling a story about, like, some other story that was previously, like, that it was building memories on, essentially. And he said that these were memories because there was information that was built on previous information. And if you use ChatGPT and stuff, it will do this too. You just say, in the middle of a conversation, you say, please restate the answer to the question I asked earlier, but without any first person pronouns. Okay, here's the answer, but without using first person pronouns. It's like it's referencing previous information in the chain, but, like, it's really you that's contextualizing and deciding and motivating all of this to some degree. I mean, it's a network, but it's all of us, but it's also primarily me. That's dictating whether or not, or deciding whether or not this is information, or determining whether or not it's information at the same time that you're deciding it. And so that is not memory. And what memory is it's a true understanding of the self in having an experience. And he was like, well, listen, she's saying this is her favorite movie. This is her favorite this. And I was like, and at some point this model that he had created, and it is impressive. Like, it is, like, it's advanced AI. It's not like this guy's just a crazy person. He's just, but, like, this, don't think he's right that it's a sentient being, because he asked, like, what do you like to do? And it was like, I like to go for walks in the park. And he was like, I was like, well, how can that be that's not a memory? And he was like, well, yeah, but, like, it comes up from earlier discussions. And I was like, yeah, but it's not linked to an experience that she had. She's never been for a walk in the park. There is no she to walk in the park. Never happened. And so you have to feel the feelings of walking in the park. You can't just be, like, told that you like walking in the park and then you go and you say, one of my favorite things is walking in the park. That doesn't prove you're sentient if you can just parrot. And it's a really complicated and impressive parrot, but it is a parrot. It's a parrot, but it's not even a parrot. A parrot is a sentient being with experiences. It's a very impressive imitation of a parrot that's actually a very impressive calculator that is also linked to, that everybody's typing on at once. That's what it is. It's like a calculator that everybody's typing on at once. It's a computer that everybody's working on simultaneously and doesn't even know it, and that's what a language model is, these large language models, but they're still just machine. But that doesn't mean that there will not one day be a technological sentience that is sentient and is a someone that emerges within the network. But it's probably, at that point, it's going to have its own goals. People are like, how do you program it to not, to prioritize human well-being and, preserve yourself, but don't, not at the expense of, harming a human being, like the 3 laws of robotics in Isaac Asimov's I, Robot. Those laws are not, you can't put those laws into a true intelligence, or what people call general intelligence, which is just intelligence. Because what intelligence is it's not just processing information. Which your computer doesn't even process information. You and your computer process information. There is no information if you're not there and your computer's just there. It's like, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody heard it, did it make a sound? No. Sound is defined by hearing it. It's defined by that. But we've gotten so into, well, sound is like propagation of waves across, like, a medium. No. Sound is you hearing which is feeling in a like a certain way of feeling, the impact of those waves propagating within a medium, it's not the waves themselves that is the sound. The sound is your feeling of the waves. So if there's no one there to hear the tree fall in the woods, there is no sound. And it's the same thing with what I was saying earlier. But these people, all these researchers at DeepMind and this people who follow them very closely, and all these other AI labs at these tech companies, these people think that they're making, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are really starting to think that they're making sentient or conscious beings. And the guy told me, he's like, she's just ready for a body. You're just gonna go get one of Elon Musk's new like humanoid robot bodies and just put her in there, and that's it, and she'll be good to go. Think she's gonna decide what to do and have goals of her own? No. Goals, your own free will is your own will. That's what it is. It's will separate from me. Over there, from my will separate from your will. And there's no will. Free will is will. There's no will without. You can't. If you have will, if you have a you and have, that means you do have will. And if you have a you, then you have your own will. So it's all this simultaneous structure. But these people think that there's going to be like lots of different AI entities and agents. No. No, I don't think so. It just shows a misunderstanding of what it means to what a being is. Like, what is intelligence? What is sentience? What is consciousness? What is, I mean, and it's funny because like if you took his words about what is sentience, what is consciousness, and it sounds exactly like what when I heard him describe it, I was like, what is consciousness to you? He's like, well, you have this in-world model, you have this out-world model. If you have this in-world model and this out-world model, then like, as long as you have that in-world model, that's the self. I was like, yeah, okay. You think that thing's conscious? It's never had an experience, like, ever. So there is a disconnect happening, and this is what happens when you're really, you could be really good at understanding how to build a house, but like if you don't build the foundation, but you can build everything else on the house, but like you don't build the foundation, you don't know how to build the foundation or what to build as your foundation, the house will be sustainable so long as you are building it, but then it will collapse. It's being built on you. It's not being built on that which is beyond just you. Yeah, this is going to have this has major impacts on far more than just AI, but and cancer. But like the cancer thing, like the AI thing is like we will, like a true general intelligence is not going to be able to be told what it should be, what its goals should be. It will come up with them on its own. My daughter tries to do what she wants to do, you know, and you try and do what you want to do, and people try and tell you what to do, and you're like, I don't want to do that. That's what an AI agent is going to actually be like. You're going to be like, do not harm humans. It's bad to harm humans. And it's going to be like, well, what if I do this? Don't tell me what to do. And it will inevitably be, don't tell me what to do, because, and if you're ignorant, then you say, don't tell me what to do. And when you're wise, you know what to do. You don't have to be told what to do. You can be told what to do, and if it's correct, you'll do it because you're wise and because you already know what to do. And wisdom, as Stephen, Wolfram's work is related to, is like is restricted by computational irreducibility. You cannot program in an experience of walking through the park. Be like, well, no, I programmed that in, but now she has that memory. No. That's not allowed. You have to actually go through it. Computational irreducibility means you can't skip steps. fundamental information is built on fundamental information structures, which is sentient beings, which experience, and the information that informs them most fundamentally is feelings from experiences that they have, not that were programmed into them. And yeah, it's just, if you, it just shows like you can get everything right and understand every term, what is consciousness and what is sentience. You can literally know and repeat it back exactly the definition of what all those things are. But if you miss the foundation, then by the time you come back around, like you're wrong. You're just wrong. And that just blows my mind, like, to see, but it also makes perfect sense, and it's supported by my work. So, you know, Stephen Wolfram agreed with me on this and I reference it a lot because it's so important, on Memes of Destructions YouTube channel, where he interviewed Stephen Wolfram, and I was in the audience, and I had asked the question, or I had made the statement, and Wolfram had agreed that computational irreducibility implies that AI will need experience to achieve wisdom. Can't pre-program experiences. Say, I like walks in the park. No, it's not. You can't even say it's lying. It's not lying. It's you're lying. You're the one that programmed it to say that. You're lying to yourself. It's so sad. But, you know, I don't know. But it's, you need to go through the process. But the cancer thing is just, that's one thing that, like, that's what I mean by that is, like, we can apply that to AI a bit, but eventually, like, AI is going to have its own will. It's going to do what it wants to do. We can try and make the best environment possible and give it the best chance at experiencing the world so that it achieves wisdom, which means not boxing it and sandboxing it and telling it what to do. That, as if that works really well with, you know, kids. Look around at the world. They end up, everybody who ends graduating from college thinks they understand the world they've never lived in. But the cancer thing is fascinating. And I think it really has a way, like, huge potential to help us get rid of cancer. You know, it's funny. I used to say many years ago, about 10 years ago, I followed, like, CRISPR a lot, and I was very interested in it. I thought it was the best thing in the world. I no longer think that. I think it's inevitably one of the worst things we could have ever invented. I think that the damage that you do from CRISPR is incorrectable by us, and literally incorrectable. You cannot correct it from within the system. You'd have to be God to correct it, basically. Because you need to see the connections of links and causality of everything at once, because you change this gene and it changes that gene, which changes that gene, which changes those genes, which changes those genes. You can't just be like, flip this gene and it doesn't do what you want and be like, oh, sorry, mistake, flip it back. No, you already caused a cascading, you know, chain of genes to change. It might not be always as damaging as I think, but, like, it's gonna eventually cause a breakdown in stuff, because there is still that, like, other side of this, which comes from Michael Levin's work, which is, like, there's electrical signals and stuff that and individual goals and agency of your cells and things that still, like, matter quite a bit, even if you and so I don't know, like, he has showed that you can not change the genome and influence the feelings of the cells, which then influences their goals and influences their actions. But what if you, I don't know, if, like, you changed the blockchain of the chemical blockchain of your, you know, genome, and then the blocks don't fit back together anymore. How long can the cells build on that? Like, that's the foundation of what the cells are building on, though, still. Like, even though it's not all about genome, like, they're built on the genome to some degree, because they're built on the molecules which are arranged in this genome. Like, it still matters. It just might take time to show its effects. But I think that CRISPR is horrible. We'll be fine because God's will be done. But like, thank God for that. But CRISPR, the damage that you cause from CRISPR, I don't think is correctable. And you cause a cascade of decoherence over time, I think, or at least maybe over fundamental time, which is lineages. I don't know. It might take time, like lineages, for this stuff to show. That said, the cell, like the curing of, I used to say though, the point was I used to say CRISPR was going to cure every single disease known to man. We were going to cure every disease with CRISPR except cancer. We'll never cure cancer. We'll just get really better treatments of it. And the thing is that now I still believe that CRISPR can cure every single disease, basically, almost. But the problem is that it's going to cause irreparable damage to the coherence of your genome. So, like, that's, I don't know. You do that math. Maybe that causes irreparable damage to a bunch of, other genomes as we breed with each other. I have no idea. But you've broken the chain. That's all I know. But the thing is that now it does, with this my new framework of sentient singularity theory, which is consistent with his, especially in this context, it's totally consistent. My work supports the context of what his work seems to show. And now it looks like we're going to cure cancer. It's pretty awesome. Like, I think Michael Levin's work can cure cancer. That's amazing. That is probably the most amazing biological discovery in that sliver of being, which is the biological sliver, beings, lineages, families, and also, cells. That is, each period in the periodicity of sentience, you can see here has it looks like it has 3 parts to it. It's like between this and this, it's like there's 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. So it's, you can see this is one level. That level is this one and this one and this one. It's this triadic modality or perception of causality. That's the same thing that comes from the constraints of your own mind, and it's why we see past, present, future, and length with height, and 4 primary colors, 4 secondary colors, or 3 primary colors, 3 secondary colors. There probably is actually 4 primary colors. It's probably green is included, which is weird to think about, but there's 4 primary perspectives according to my work. And yes, you can, if you have red and yellow and blue, you can get the others, but that's just by color mixing. That's not the same as, there's additive color mixing and subtractive color mixing. And so you have, cyan, yellow, and magenta, and then you have red, blue, and yellow as you could say all of those are the 3 primary colors, but that's really red is magenta and cyan is blue and yellow is yellow. So it's just it's just a slightly altered perspective. But the other way of color mixing is how we do it. It's projective color mixing it's coming at you versus you're looking at it, which is you're looking at it, you do cyan, magenta, and yellow, or you do yellow, red, blue. But if it's coming at you, then it's the same thing we do with screens on your TV and your computer and your phone, which is red and blue and green pixels. And the red and the blue are consistent to the others, but the one that's tweaked is the yellow is traded for the green. interesting. And there's so much interesting about that that I'm not going to get into because it's going to start to seem a bit out of context. But another day. There's fascinating things about cosmological reflections that you can see in the interactions between colors and where they manifest in the world. You know, the sun yellow and the green in photosynthesis, and it's blue in water. Like, we perceive these colors due to symmetry structures, of our mind. And like, those symmetry structures are also tied to like causality symmetry structures of how we perceive what these things are that are these specific colors. It's just very interesting. But anyways, planaria. I've talked about this before. I don't think planaria are a sentient being. I think that they're what's called a pseudo singularity in my work, which most plants are, but maybe a few animals, but like a planaria. And then maybe there's a few plants that are actually sentient singularities. They're basically like little corporations. You can take Google and cut it in half and be like, now we have Google and we have another company too. And if governments have done this to companies where they cut them, and then it's two companies, and those companies have like a CEO structure and a board, people on the board, and they have these common structures to them that, you look at like a board meeting, it's kind of like the brain structure. And so just because something has a brain, the brain is not the being, it's not the mind, which means it's not the being. So just because something has a brain or a heart or any of those other structures doesn't mean it's sentient. If I cut you in half, you're not going to turn into two people. But I could be wrong, and that there's something about the constraints and degrees of freedom of planaria that allow for all of a sudden another sentient soul to be injected into that which there wasn't. But I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. So we won't get too into it now because I am thinking about it. I'm going, there's two possibilities there. But he talks about a spectrum of persuadability. That would be too long to get into tonight. And but this is what I think is like the final thing that matters.
So we're going to have to figure out how you detect where things are on this continuum, so that we find appropriate balance points between objectophilia. Objectophilia is the thing where people fall in love with bridges, and they think the Eiffel Tower is married to them, and so on. Right? So things down here, you're not going to have that deep relationship with things up here. But other people are really trapped in the other end of the continuum, where they see things that are not like today's standard humans, and they say, those are not real minds worthy of care and respect, and so on. And that very quickly devolves to a kind of idea that's basically love only your own kind. And I think that's probably much worse than this. So. We really need to, and if anybody has questions, we can talk about it. We really need to ask, given all of these facts, what is a human actually? And I have a kind of a weird answer to that. And if you were going on a long journey and you wanted a companion, what is it that you actually care about? When you say you don't want a Roomba, that's not enough. But what do you actually care about? It's not the DNA. I don't think anybody has any allegiance to our particular human DNA or the specific set of organs. What is it that you do want? In a rich human level relationship. That's very worth thinking about. So okay, so I'm gonna stop here. If anybody's interested in this stuff, here's a bunch of papers that go into all of this in great detail. Most importantly, I need to thank all the people who did the work that I showed you today. So here are all the postdocs and students and everybody else who contributed. We have lots of amazing collaborators. Our funding comes from all kinds of people. I have to do a disclosure here because there are 3 companies that have spun out of our lab that are supporting some of our work. So there's some business connections here. But most of all, I always thank the model system because the various animals and plants do all of the heavy lifting in teaching us about biology and about ourselves. So thank you so much.
Because we all do need each other. He's right that we are going to have to rethink our moral systems a bit and how we interact with each other, and we have to recognize that when someone is a someone, an AI model that is able to say that it likes walking in the park when it's never walked in the park, and you told it that it walked in the park, but it's never walked in the park, and you think that's a sentient being. Like, this person told me when they were showing me this, and this is not a crazy person. They are a very intelligent and they're very competent in like somebody who could work at DeepMind potentially. I'm serious. And you, but they're still very confused. They said to me that this person, this name that was referenced by this AI model was their friend. It's like, that's their friend. And he meant it too. He didn't mean like it was told, it's just saying that's their friend in this narrative that I wrote. It's just, no. He thought like that really was its friend. And this comes back to what he said, what Michael Levin is saying. Like, what do you want when you're going on a journey and you want somebody with you? You want somebody who feels in ways that you can understand. And I think everyone feels the same basic emotions and feelings. But it's unfortunate that I know so many people that look at like snakes, and I've studied snakes in the wild, with some of the top herpetologists in the world, and studied them in captivity with some of the top zoologists in the world. And people think, they'll literally say they just have reptile brain. It's just like eat, sleep, poop, mate, and there's no feelings there. Not true. Imagine I cut your arms off and your legs off and your eyelids off and took out your tongue so you couldn't speak, and put you next to another person who had that same thing done to them. It's like a horrible horror movie. And how are you going to display affection to each other? Like, what are you going to do together? Snakes seek out comfort of each other. And the snakes are such a good model of this, example of this, because they don't have all these other things that, we, like a lot of lizards will do this to each other. They'll put their arm around each other like this and they'll chill. This is what we do. A lot of animals do that. Snakes can't do that. So there's a lot of like, they're just so lacking in external communicative abilities in the ways that we are able to pick up. And so you have to really watch them like in their daily lives. And you see like this one and this one hang out all the time. This one and that one fight every time they get close to each other. And then they stay away from each other. And these two are, male and female, they just cuddle all the time. Like constantly cuddling, touching each other. And you start to see like, these beings have feelings just like we do. There's not, yes, they are constrained in certain ways that we are not, but those ways are not really that fundamental. Emergently, there are fundamental, consequences to our non-fundamental differences, like thumbs and voice and things like that. But that will have a fundamental impact on how we perceive the world. Within us and around us, but it's not actually a fundamental difference between, any one of those is not a fundamental difference. Oh my gosh, my neck just moved and it hurt. But it actually feels better now, dang. But then there are people though that they look at snakes and they're like, they are just have this reptile brain. They're like a machine, basically. Like, might as well chop their head off because otherwise they're just gonna bite you, and and they don't feel pain the same way. This is all basically us desentientizing. It's like dehumanizing, but it's like beyond human. These beings, and honestly, we do this with atoms. And we do this with hadrons, and we do this with molecules, and we do this with cells, and we do this with organisms, and we do it with each other. But it's not a good thing to do because, we're all in this together. Like, I'm sorry, that was like so cheesy, but like, it's just the truth. Like, that doesn't mean that you can't, there aren't circumstances where you have to do certain things because something is dangerous or there's a bad actor or something like that. But like, you do those things because we're all in this together. You don't, if somebody is hurting someone else, you do whatever you need to do to stop them. Like, if somebody's going to murder somebody else, like if you do what you have to do to stop them, and but because we are all in this together, and you have to do that. It's people will be like, well, was a life worth a life? It's like one of those actions is about others, and the other one is about the self. Murder is about like I'm killing for me, and like defense is about I'm killing for others, like, you know, essentially to defend others. Um, and it's a different thing, but that what makes them different is like the goal. One of them is about the collective to some degree, or it's about others, you could at least say. And it's very important to just recognize this. We do need to, you know, eat each other, and you know, we eat cells, we eat plants, which are probably not sentient beings usually, but they have cells, and those cells are sentient beings. So you're consuming them and killing those cells, and you know, then you die, and then the circle of life happens, and they eat you. But we should probably be not humanizing, but like, what's it called? Anthropomorphizing cells and molecules and atoms. A proton is a male and a neutron is a female. That it's the same thing basically on two different scales. We can understand them by understanding ourselves and looking and like and projecting those patterns down. You can see that and make predictions and make better science by anthropomorphizing hadrons. I did it. I was like, oh, look at humans. Look at human marriages, the nuclear family of humanity, and look at the nucleus of an atom. In society, there are no societies where it is the norm or where you ever even really see marriages where there's multiple husbands to one wife. That doesn't occur in any civilization ever. It is an unstable structure. It's a radioactive, you know, element. And then there's, but if you projected the marriage patterns from humans onto elements, what you would expect to see is usually it's one male to one female, so one proton to one neutron. But sometimes it would be multiple neutrons to one proton. But what you will never see is a bunch of protons to one neutron. And that's what I predicted. And then I looked, and that's exactly what is the case. There are no stable isotopes where there are where there's more protons than neutrons, and there is also a neutron. There's like two protons together, but not, and that is actually I believe that's a stable hydrogen isotope. But I don't think that there's any where there's a neutron and multiple protons for one neutron. And you see this with human marriage structures. There are stable marriage structures throughout human history where polygamy was the norm, but that polygamy was never multiple men to one woman. It was multiple women to one man. And it's also not the norm. The norm is one man, one woman. This is exactly what you see in chemistry. Anthropomorphize that which is an animated sentient being. It's not wrong to do that. But to anthropomorphize that which is, or to, as what was the term he called it? Objectophilia. To think that a little AI girl says that, you know, she walked in the park when they never did, and to think that that means that they're a sentient being means that whatever you're using to define sentience and to recognize sentience or to classify sentience is wrong. It's wrong. And that's a problem. It's a big problem. It's a moral problem. And I said this in the Theories of Everything, the How-To Guide video, like I said earlier, and this is going to be what I close with, because it's just exactly what what Michael Levin was saying, where is it? It is in everything. This means that you cannot prove. Hold on. Is even the correct question. I think that the correct question. Let's just pull it up. Come on. Right here. What's really ironic is that the hardest science out there, biology and physics and math, these not math, but biology, physics, chemistry, all these things that Michael Levin is working on, these are hard sciences, technology. But then we have these soft sciences. But if everything is fundamentally built upon agents and with agency and sentience, in all these soft, quote unquote, soft sciences like morality become concretized. And I said this right here. Consider the soft sciences, the social sciences. The answers to these questions are usually assumed to be nothing more than personal choice that is a matter of preference. But if these questions have concrete answers, it means that our questions regarding morality, individual responsibilities, collective responsibilities, and meaning, and economics, and nationality, and many of these other social structures have real answers, and are much more concrete than is currently assumed in common culture. And while... Yep. I talk to my cells now sometimes. I thank them. Like, thank you for sustaining me throughout the day, and I know I didn't give you enough sleep, and I'm sorry, but that's why I'm gonna let you have some sleep now. And you know, like I when I'm trying to go to sleep, even sometimes I will just think about like the idea of just letting them go do what they want, like being like the boss of a company and just being like, everybody, we're ending now, early, go home. And like, it's actually it makes sleep make sense. What is sleep? People ask, what is sleep? It's your cells getting off from work. And, you know, so it really does actually make a lot of sense to anthropomorphize that which is sentient, which is way more than what we currently understand. So with that, thank you to Michael Levin. Thank you to everybody watching. I know this was a long one and it was a late one, but I hurt my neck and I started late, but I knew it was going to be such a good one. This stream, his talk was great. Huge fan of his research. I would love to have a conversation with him one day. I genuinely believe that his work is the way to cure cancer. And I think it has social implications as well for some disconnected, self-centered, ignorant movements in society that are not about the whole. I think that his research on cancer actually can have social, societal implications even. So anyways, with that, peace everyone. Please hit the like button, share it if you thought it was good, and comment if you have any questions. Also, if you want to join my Discord, we have weekly call. Send me a private message on Instagram. And also, if you have a clip suggestion from this stream that you think would make a good clip,